Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, the DN WhatIf, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into part 1 of What If Deku Was Trained by Mirko? A special shout out to the original creator, resistantborg. Please make sure to show your support by checking out their work from the description. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. 9-year-old Izuku Midoriya was a scrawny quirkless kid with no friends, but that didn't really matter to him. He was going to be a hero no matter what anyone said. You see, people always imagine heroes to be someone like All Might, someone who can blow up a block of buildings with one punch. But to Izuku, a hero was someone who helped people no matter what. He didn't care that Kaken called him useless, or his mom treated him like he was made of glass, or even that his teachers messed with his grades. If he could help even one person, he'd be okay. Izuku was walking home from the store after buying a snack, and walked past his neighborhood park. He heard the sounds of kids playing, and he tried to ignore the sad feeling in his chest. He let himself think about the different heroes he'd seen on the news recently to distract himself. The rabbit hero Mirko had just moved to Mizudafu. She was super cool and would definitely be a top hero in the next few years. Izuku started thinking about her quirk, and he almost missed the cry of pain coming from the park. When he looked to his left, he saw a girl with a deer mutation quirk being pushed down by a group of kids. They were calling her mean names and she began crying. Izuku didn't even have time to think before he was running towards the group. Nakaguro Nakaguro. Rumi had just gotten off of her patrol and couldn't wait to get home. She kicked a few asses today and now her feet were killing her. There was a bowl of fresh carrots and a few beers calling her name. She was taking her usual shortcut through the local park when she noticed a group of asshole kids pushing a little girl down and circling around her. Rumi felt rage filling her as memories of her own childhood filled her head. Images of kids pushing her around and making fun of her quirk pushed her forward, ready to step in to protect the girl from the group of bullies. Before she could get too close though, a scrawny little kid with green hair jumped in front of the girl. The kid was clearly scared, but he stood his ground and told the bullies off for messing with the girl. The group just laughed at the kid and went to hit him next. Luckily, Rumi was fast as hell, so she jumped in front of the little shit that was about to push the kid and gave him one of her signature glares. "Oh my gosh! It's Mirko!" One of the kids yelled. They started swarming her and asking for her autograph, and it pissed her off. Why would I give my autograph to a bunch of assholes who were just messing with other kids? She crossed her arms over her chest to look even more intimidating. The group of idiots paled, before hanging their heads and giving a half-assed apology, then walked off in different directions. Now that the group was gone, she turned to the two kids that were getting picked on. "You two okay?" The boy was trying to help the girl up, but she swatted his hand away and shot him a glare. "I don't need help from a quirkless freak, Deku." She huffed before getting up and walking away. The boy was frozen for a moment before hanging his head low, tears brimming his eyes. Are all the kids in this neighborhood fucking assholes? Rumi thought to herself. "Hey kid, screw her. You were awesome back there." The little guy's eyes lit up and he looked at her like she just offered him the world. Really?" The boy stuttered out. "Yeah, bullies suck. How about I walk you home, kid?" The boy bobbed his head up and down quickly, his curls bouncing on his head as he gave her a bright smile. "Okay. As long as it's not too much trouble." The boy wrung his hands nervously. "Nah, it's no trouble at all." Rumi normally didn't like kids too much, but something about this kid really spoke to her. Someone who was clearly spit on by the world, but still stepped in to help when it was needed. As they walked towards the kid's apartment building, she realized they lived down the street from each other. She watched him walking next to her and felt a new feeling blossoming in her, one of protectiveness. In her 21 years of life, she never felt the urgent need to keep a kid away from assholes before. The kid, Izuku is what he told her to call him, paused for a second, clearly wanting to ask something. She patiently waited as he worked up the courage to ask her his question. "Do you think a quirkless person could be a hero?" The kid wouldn't meet her eyes when he asked. Rumi looked at this kid, who was nothing more than skin and bones, who willingly put himself between someone who needed help and danger. Her face formed into a rare, genuine smile before she answered his question. Hell yeah. Especially someone who is badass like you. She knew in her heart that if this kid applied himself, he could become a pro. Izuku looked up at her with sparkling eyes, speechless. She looked into the kid's eyes and cursed at herself. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure this kid's dreams come true. They finished their walk to the kid's apartment, and his mom invited her in. Would you like some tea, Mirko-san? Izuku's mom asked. Oh, please call me Rumi. Tea would be great, thank you. Rumi sat on the couch next to Izuku, watching him write in a notebook. Of course, Rumi. Please call me Inko then. The green-haired woman made her way to the kitchen to get started on tea and snacks. What you working on there, Kit? Rumi looked over his shoulder as he stopped writing. Oh, I like to analyze heroes, so I write down facts about them and any questions I have about their quirks. I have one on you if you want a seat. This kid is full of anxiety, I need to make sure to help him with his confidence. Yeah, let me see what you got. She watched as he flipped through the pages until he landed on her pages. Rumi was currently ranked number 40, and finally had her own agency so that she could work alone. She wondered what the kid would write about her. A few minutes later, she was sitting in shock after reading over her spread in the notebook. Izuku was smart as hell, and very observant from what she saw. He had great suggestions for her costume, new support gear, and even new ways to take advantage of her quirk. She finally looked over her weakness section and bristled at the last bullet point. Does not work well with others. We'll see about that. Doesn't work well with others, huh? Well, that's just cause I don't like working with punks who can't hold their own. Great analysis though, kid. We gotta find you someone that can help you hone these skills. Izuku just giggles at her statement, blushing at her praise. Well, like I said, I don't normally like working with people. But I think you'd make a great teammate. What do you say? Wanna get trained by a pro? Izuku sputters before looking at her in awe. What? You'd train me? The sparkles were back in his eyes and she felt firm in her decision to train him. Yeah. We just gotta make sure it is okay with your mom, okay? After a cup of tea and a great conversation with the young hero, Inko readily agreed for her son to train. They set up a schedule, meeting every day after school and her patrol, and everyone went to sleep that night with a new sense of satisfaction. Nakaguro. 6 months later. Izuku felt like his thighs were going to fall off, but he knew this was just a sign of hard work. Every day after school, and even on the weekends, he would meet Rumi for various types of training. She had him lifting weights, working on hand-to-hand combat, and even parkour. Rumi really felt like a big sister to the 9-year-old, and she was also his only friend. He tried to hide the bullying from her, but she noticed the bruises and burns as soon as they started training together. He wouldn't give her any names, but she taught him some easy ways to get out of certain holds just in case. His daily run also helped him build stamina and gave him the ability to run away from his tormentors. Today was an especially bad day, as a few of the students pushed him halfway down a flight of stairs. Luckily, he wasn't badly injured, but he had a few bumps and bruises on his arms and legs. You're gonna be a better hero than any of those assholes, Green Bean. The pro ruffled the boy's curls, a smile on her face but concern in her eyes as she saw the newest batch of cuts and scrapes. She spoke to Inko constantly about Izuku's progress, as well as her concerns about the bullying, but Izuku refused to open up or switch schools. Rumi definitely thought of him as her little brother now, and it was frustrating that she couldn't do anything to help him. Izu, you know you can come to me with anything, right? Rumi finished patching him up, and the boy nodded to her. Thanks, Rumi. I know I can always count on you and Mom. They both stood to leave the gym they trained at. Inko had insisted that Rumi join them for dinner after each training session, and Rumi initially was hesitant. She was a lone wolf, so this was all very new to her. Luckily, she finally bit the bullet and started having dinner with the Midoriyas, and now she really felt like part of the family. She happily ate her meal, taking a moment to appreciate her little bro and her pseudo-mom. She couldn't wait to see what her little green bean made of himself. The world wasn't ready. Izuku's 10th birthday party was the best one he ever had. This year Rumi came and brought him a few gifts, and his mom got him a really cool All Might cake. In previous years it had just been him and his mom, as he didn't have any friends at school. Rumi helped him see that Kaken, who he was now calling Bakugo, wasn't a good friend, so Izuku tried to distance himself from the blonde as much as possible. Training with Rumi made him feel a lot more confident in himself too. It turns out that she was bullied too because people thought she'd be weak with a rabbit quirk. His big sister gave him lots of tips on how to look intimidating and not being such a people pleaser. Rumi always told him that in order to save people, he has to make sure to save himself too. The three of them spent the day watching All Might movies and they went to the arcade. Rumi was really good at Dance Dance Revolution, but Izuku gave her a challenge for a few of the rounds. Izuku went to sleep with a wide smile on his face. He couldn't imagine being any luckier than he already was. Nakaguro. Shoyuda was not known to be a patient man, but when it came to his loud blonde husband, he forced himself to be. He was currently walking with said man on a Sunday morning, much earlier than he would have liked to wake up. Hitoshi had wanted to go to a new cafe by their house and Shota begrudgingly agreed. He did have to admit that the coffee was good, if not a bit overpriced. Hitoshi was telling him about a new idea for his radio show when they heard a scream from across the street. A piece of concrete was falling from the nearby construction site, and a little girl was frozen in fear looking up at it. Before the two pros could react, a flash of green darted across 2 lanes of cars and tackled the girl out of the way at the last minute. Nakaguro. Izuku only wanted to get some new stationery, honestly. But it seems the universe did not want him to have a normal Sunday morning. He heard a scream and his body moved before he knew what he was doing. Luckily, Rumi had included a lot of parkour in his training, so he easily passed over the stopped cars on the road. Once he had tackled the girl away from the large piece of concrete, he tried to check her over for injuries. Her mother rushed over to thank him for saving her little girl, hugging him while sobbing. Before he could fully process what was going on, 2 men ran over to check on them. When he looked up, he immediately recognized 2 of his favorite heroes. Eraserhead and Mic? His eyes were as wide as saucers. The 2 men froze for a moment before shaking their heads. "You know who we are, kiddo?" Mic asked with clear excitement. "Yeah. But before we talk about that, does anyone have a band-aid?" "She's okay, but she has a little scrape on her knee." The 2 pros quickly pulled out some first aid supplies, while Eraserhead patched the girl's knee up. They were both impressed by the boy prioritizing the girl's wellness over his excitement. Once the girl was bandaged and left with her mother, Izuku pulled out one of his notebooks. Is it okay if I get your autograph?" he asked shyly, looking to the ground. He missed the fond expressions on the 2 heroes' faces. "Sure, little listener. Just show us what page to sign." Izuku opened up his book to his Mic analysis and handed it over. Sorry if it's a little weird. I just really like analyzing heroes." The young boy looked to his feet once again. Nakaguro. Hitoshi was having a very weird day. First, he was actually able to convince Sho to wake up early and go to a new cafe with him, with minimal bribing. Then, they saw a kid who couldn't have been older than 11 pull off a rescue most first-year hero students would have struggled with. To top it off, this little cutie just handed him multiple pages of analysis that could have been professional work. He must have been staring in shock for longer than he thought because his husband elbowed him in his side. He quickly signed it and handed the notebook back to the kid, who opened it up to a new set of pages and handed it to Shota. His fellow hero had a much better poker face while he hid his shock, and instead asked the kid a few questions. "This is a really impressive analysis, kid. Who taught you?" "Oh, nobody. I've just been doing it since I was a little kid. It's really nothing special." Seeing this sweet kid talk down on a really impressive skill broke his heart, and he could see the concern in Shota's face as well. "What's your name?" Shota asked as he finished with the book. I'm Midoriya Izuku. You already know my hero name, but you can call me Aizawa. Do you have some type of analysis quirk?" This kid must have some type of intelligence enhancer. Shota was right. It seemed like something was wrong with that question, though, as a dark cloud seemed to cover the kid. He looked to the ground before whispering something. "Sorry, I didn't catch that, kiddo?" Hitoshi leaned forward a bit more. I am quirkless." Hitoshi shared a concerned glance with his husband. The quirkless were treated horribly in their society, but it only made this kid's skills even more impressive. Hitoshi said as much. That only makes your rescue of that little girl and your analysis even more impressive. He put on a bright smile, hoping to comfort the kid. His heart grew a few sizes when the kid's eyes filled with sparkles. Really? You think so? Shota was the one to respond this time. Absolutely. Your analysis is better than a lot of the pros I know, and the way you reacted before anyone else was able to, as well as your skill leaping over the cars, was extremely impressive. It was extremely rare to hear his husband compliment someone so much, but he was sure it was genuine. The kid's entire demeanor changed, and his face held a determined expression as he geared up to say something else. Do you think a quirkless person could become a hero? He and Shota both said yes at the same time, although he said it with a little more excitement. A tear escaped the kid's eye as he smiled brightly once again, warming Hitoshi's entire being. Cool. I'm going to be the first quirkless hero. Midoriya said it so confidently that Hitoshi couldn't help but believe him. Nakaguro. Aizawa and Yamada ended up going with Izuku to the stationery store, and Yamada wouldn't let him pay for his new things. He said it was a reward for saving the little girl, but Izuku still felt a little bad. They walked him home, wanting to tell his mom what a great job he did, but Rumi answered the door instead. Even though she had her own place, she liked to hang out at their house most of the time. Mike? Rumi looked between Aizawa and Yamada in confusion. Mirko? Yamada exclaimed as well. Rumi ushered them inside and Izuku's mom made them all tea and snacks. When the two heroes told the story of Izuku saving the girl, Rumi gave him a thigh five. She then explained how she met Izuku and had been training him for a while, and how he was her little brother now. What happened next shocked him. Would he benefit from another trainer? He has more potential than some of my first years, I'd be happy to help mold it. Aizawa said casually like he didn't just blow Izuku's mind. Hey, if you're training the little green bean I want in as well. Yamada playfully poked his husband in the side. Rumi looked to Izuku and his mom in question, not wanting to confirm before she got permission. Izuku simply nodded his head violently, and his mom gave him a soft smile. I'm fine with that, as long as my Izuku is safe and you check in with me once a week. I also insist that you come over for dinner when you can. His mom replied to the group. Izuku couldn't help but cheer. He had 3 heroes that actually thought he could achieve his dreams. It didn't matter what Bakugo said, or whatever anyone else said. He had his mom, his big sister, and now Yamada and Aizawa believing in him. He could do it. Nakaguro. A few days later Izuku was standing in the gym at the Yamada-Aizawa household. It was a large underground room with decently high ceilings and different equipment. He was currently standing in the sparring area with Aizawa. Let's see what you got, kid. Izuku was used to Rumi's fighting style, which mostly involved kicks and jumps. Aizawa fought more like an acrobat, and his speed was unbeatable. Still, Izuku lasted around 5 minutes before he was pinned. Not bad at all, but there is definitely room to improve. Aizawa trained him on different fight styles, allowing him to adopt them into his own unique style. He and Rumi worked together to strengthen his parkour skills, and he even visited the fake cities at UA twice a month for more intense training. His stealth training went so well that he actually had to give his mom a verbal cue when he walked into rooms so that he didn't startle her. He started learning different weapons, mostly using staffs and dull knives, but he was always interested in Aizawa's scarf. He was surprised to find a dark olive green capture weapon under the Christmas tree, with his very own setup throwing knives. They were given with the condition that they stay in the training room for now, but Izuku couldn't believe his mentor's generosity. Aizawa definitely became an uncle, if not a father-like figure, in his life over the months. Nakaguro. While Aizawa taught him the essentials of being an underground hero, Yamada, who he just stuck with calling Mike, taught him the skills of a limelight hero. He learned how to take down long-range opponents quickly and efficiently, with minimal property damage. He also taught Izuku about the importance of staying positive, even during tough times, because citizens look to heroes for inspiration. So if a hero is freaking out, the citizens are going to freak out. Izuku really liked Yamada's style, which was eccentric and bright. But he also liked Aizawa's black and grays. Yamada and Rumi took him shopping, showing him how to show his personality through fashion. He learned how clothes are supposed to fit, and he even learned how to tie a tie. His new style still showed his personality, but it looked like he actually put some thought into it. His favorite piece of clothing was a leather jacket that matched one that Mike wore. He loved training with the two heroes, but he also really enjoyed sitting in their house and lounging with cats, working on his analysis while he watched TV. Sometimes he would even spend the night. He had his own guest room where he kept a change of clothes and a few extra notebooks. They kept his favorite treats in their house too. He even heard Aizawa say he was hanging out with his nephew when he got a call one day. It made him feel really warm inside, knowing that two more adults cared about him. His dreams felt closer than ever before. Izuku checked his book bag one last time, making sure he had everything he needed for his day out. He wanted to find a few villain fights to analyze, and maybe find some new quirks to write about. He made sure his location was shared with his mom, Uncle Sho, Uncle Zashi, and Rumi before he left out for the day. After a few hours it didn't seem like he'd see anything before he had to go home. He made his way to a small sushi restaurant for lunch, hoping he'd be able to see some action today. Nakaguro. Kigo felt like he was on top of the world today. He had opened his very own agency a month ago, and at 18 he had already broken into the top 20. He didn't have any friends or family, but he was living out his dream of being a hero. That was enough. At least that's what he told himself. A loud crash interrupted his thoughts, and he quickly swooped down to the streets below to see what was going on. He landed next to a group of officers that were trying to push the crowd away, and he saw the smoke coming from a nearby bank. "What's the situation, officers?" His eyes were moving a mile a minute, trying to take in the scene in front of him. The villain has a mutant-type quirk that gives him wolf-like strength and appearance. There are 5 hostages, all in the back right corner. Perimeter is secured and we can push back spectators at your notice. The officer showed him a diagram of the bank as he spoke. "Rad. Thanks, officer. I'll take it from here." Kigo leapt up and landed on the roof of the building, looking through one of the ceiling windows. The villain was near the front of the building, far away from the hostages. Amateur. Kigo used one of his feathers to cut through the glass, and picked up the piece with a few more. He didn't want to come crashing through and alert the villain of his presence. He landed in front of the hostages and told them how to get out through the back. Once they were cleared, the villain finally noticed the new arrival. "You know, for someone with wolf characteristics your hearing sure does suck." The wolfman simply snarled and launched himself at the hero. That was a bad decision. He expanded his wings and lifted himself up a few feet in the air, pushing his legs out to kick the man in the chest. The momentum pushed him through the front doors, with the hero hot on his tail. The fight lasted a few more minutes, but it was clear that the man had no fighting experience. While he was getting the last few hits in, Kigo spotted a kid with bushy green hair feverishly writing notes while watching the fight. Interesting. He quickly sent one of his feathers to land on the kid's book bag. He wanted to talk to the fanboy after he was done. Anyone who could focus on a fight while writing deserved a personal hello from the hero Hawks. Once the villain was secured in police custody, Kigo followed his feather to the boy, who was walking away with the rest of the crowd. The hero pulled his wings in and carefully placed his hand on the kid's shoulder, not wanting to startle him. Bright green eyes widened at the sight of the person behind him. "Hawks!" The kid was visibly buzzing with excitement. "Hey kiddo, I saw you during the fight and I wanted to ask you what you were writing. It's really hard to pay attention to 2 things at once, but you seemed like a pro." Kigo had never done anything like this before, but something about the broccoli boy was intriguing. "Oh, this is my analysis journal. My uncles and sister have been helping me to make my notes more organized, so I like to practice with live villain fights." The boy pulled his journal out and shoved it into Kigo's hands. It was open to the most recent entry, dissecting today's fight. This kid couldn't be more than 12, and his analysis was better than some of the people Kigo paid at his agency. "This is wow kid. You hungry?" The kid looked at him curiously, but nodded. "I just ate, but I can always eat a bit more." The hero laughed before introducing himself. "You can keep calling me Hawks, but my real name is Takami Kigo." "Kigo's fine with me." The kid gave him a megawatt smile before sharing his own name. "Midoriya Izuku, but you can call me Izuku. The pair walked to Kigo's favorite chicken restaurant, with the hero having to stop a few times for pictures and autographs. When they arrived, he waved to the couple that owned the place before sitting at his usual table. He chatted with the kid about his analysis a bit, before their food came. A big bucket of fried chicken and a few containers of sides were set in front of him. "How much do I owe you, Kigo?" The kid started taking out his wallet. The hero waved him off. "Kid, I'm a pro hero in the top 20. I am not making an 11-year-old child pay for a meal I invited him to. Besides, your analysis is extremely helpful. That's enough for me." The kid blushed and nodded at the hero's compliment of his skills, before the pair dug into their meal. Nakaguro. Kigo was so cool. Izuku made sure to text his family that he was okay, and Hawks even let him take a selfie to send to the group chat. Izuku's adopted heroes. Green Bean, "Hey guys. Look who I'm eating lunch with. He thinks my analysis is really cool and said he wants to mentor me." Laughing face. Mama Midoriya, "Wow baby. Tell Hawks he needs to meet with your mother first, but I don't see why that would be an issue." Smiley face. Uncle Sleepy, "Are you just going to keep collecting pros like this, kid?" Izuku laughed at his uncle's question, before confirming that they would be back home in a bit. Once he was finished texting, he wanted to ask Kigo the one question that he had asked every pro in his life. "Hey Kigo." The man finished his bite of chicken before nodding to the boy. "What's up, Squirt?" Izuku took a grounding breath before he continued. "Do you think a quirkless person can be a hero?" Kigo stared at him for a few moments, like he was looking for something in his eyes. He must have found it, because he finally replied with a wide smile on his face. "Hell yeah, kid." Nakaguro. An hour later and they had finished eating, after talking about anything they could think of. Izuku texted his mom to let her know he would be home soon. Hawks offered to fly him home, and how could he refuse? They landed in front of the Midoriya apartment, and when Izuku invited him in he was surprised to see both his uncles and his big sister sitting with his mom in the living room. "Oh hey guys." Kigo was standing in the doorway with a confused expression. "You guys are the uncles and sister he was talking about? How many pros do you know, kid?" "For now." Izuku didn't understand the hero's surprise. It's not like he was purposefully collecting them or anything. "Hawks, is it? Please come sit. I heard you wanted to mentor my Izuku." Inko smiled sweetly at the hero. Uncle Sho seemed to hide a smirk in his capture weapon as Kigo suppressed a shiver at his mom's expression. It was a joke in their family that Mama Inko was the one you really had to watch out for. Nakaguro. Over the past few months, Izuku has learned to really appreciate having an older brother with his own fancy agency. The building had multiple gyms and training facilities, and the cafeteria had the best food ever. He was also happy that his two big siblings get along so well. Rumi started coming with him when he was training with Hawks, and the two hung out sometimes after their patrols. His brother and sister were really lonely before, and he was happy they had each other now. Seeing their easy friendship filled Izuku with a bit of longing. He still didn't have any friends his own age. Bakugo had stopped trying to follow him after Izuku began escaping him constantly, but the verbal taunts had not stopped. No one wanted to hang out with the quirkless kid. Although, watching his two siblings spar and laugh together, he felt less sad than he might a few years ago. Izuku was sitting at his desk, thinking about his plans for the weekend. He was going to meet up with Kigo and Rumi so that they could go to the new arcade that opened up downtown on Saturday. Then, Uncle Sho and Uncle Zashi said they would take him to the Tokyo Hero Museum on Sunday. Even though he knew they all cared about him, it always surprised him when they wanted to spend their days off with him. He was so excited that he didn't realize he was tapping on his desk until red eyes turned to glare at him. "Will you stop being annoying for once, shitty nerd?" Bakugo had been a little less aggressive as they got older, but Izuku still had plenty of burns to testify for the blonde's temper. "Oh, sorry Bakugo." The explosive boy still flinched a bit when Izuku used his family name, and it filled Izuku with a sick form of glee. "You call me useless every day, asshole." Rumi's temper and cursing had definitely rubbed off on him, even though they only made an appearance in his internal monologue. The bell rang and Izuku quickly packed up his things, ready to head home after a long day. He had the next 4 days off of training after he suffered a minor sprain of his right ankle. His family never wanted to push him too hard, they wanted him to still have a childhood. He was a few blocks away from his house when he sensed that something was wrong. Shitty Deku. So it's going to be one of those days, huh? Izuku had been sparring with pros since he was 9, but he never used it to defend himself. He believed it would only make things worse if he fought back, and he'd end up suspended. But today he was tired, and he really hoped his ex-friend wouldn't take it too far. His inner Rumi was itching for a fight. He felt a burning palm on his shoulder before he was shoved to the ground. When he turned, he found Bakugo standing over him, with a few boys from their class watching in glee. You were extra annoying today, nerd. I think you need a reminder about your place. This was the kid that told him he couldn't be a hero? Someone who got this much joy out of hurting others? On any other day, Izuku would have just taken the beating. But he thought about all of the heroes in his life, people that worked every day to save people. People that believed in him. He thought it was about time that Bakugo learned that Izuku was not weak. Bakugo lunged at Izuku with a right hook, which was exactly what Izuku predicted he would do. Instead of letting the hit land, Izuku grabbed Bakugo's wrist and used his uninjured foot to knock the boy's legs out from under him. Bakugo managed to get free from Izuku's grasp, and when he lunged for Izuku again he was met with a fist to the face. Izuku didn't use enough force to break anything, but he knew the blonde would have a nasty black eye for a while. He grabbed both of Bakugo's wrists and slammed him onto the ground, his face in the dirt and his hands behind his back. If you ever fucking touch me again, Kaken, I will break your wrists. If I see you messing with any other kids, I will break your nose. Do you understand me? His voice was firm, confident even, but on the inside he was a nervous wreck. He was doing his best to channel his inner Rumi and Uncle Shota. Bakugo must have been in shock, because he merely nodded at Izuku's threat. When he turned around, still not letting go of the boy underneath him, he saw Bakugo's posse staring at him in fear. That goes for the rest of you assholes too. With his final threat, he brushed himself off and grabbed his bag, angrily stomping away. Now I have to go to the store and get burn cream, and my ankle hurts even worse. Izuku grabbed his phone from his backpack, already sending a text to the family group chat. Izuku's #1 fans. Green Bean, I may have done something. Midoriya, Izuku honey, are you okay? Angry Bunny, do we need to hide a body? Chicken Nugget, Rumi WTF? Angry Bunny, I just need to know what type of situation we're getting into. Uncle Sleepy, and your first thought was that the kid murdered someone? Uncle Loud, how about we let the little listener tell us what happened first? Midoriya, Izuku? Izuku was almost to the corner store, but he paused to text his family the story. Bakugo and some of his friends followed me after school. He pushed me to the ground and tried to punch me, but I pinned him to the ground, and might have told him I'd break his wrist if he ever touched me again? Or if he messed with other kids I'd break his nose. With a few curse words included. He may or may not have a black eye. And I may have called his friends assholes? Midoriya, I see a new All Might figure and some ice cream in your future, smiley face. Green Bean, you're not mad? Midoriya, well, maybe if Mitsuki had listened to me when I said that Katsuki could benefit from anger management sessions, her son would not have a black eye. Smiley face. Uncle Sleepy, as a teacher and pro hero, I cannot condone this. As your uncle, however, I must say good for you, kid. Angry Bunny, Angry Bunny, that's my little bro. Chicken Nugget, I will do everything in my power to win you all of the All Might prizes tomorrow, Squirt. I also need you to tell me where this was so that I can find and watch the security footage. Uncle Sleepy, done. Uncle Sleepy, Green Bean takedown.vid. Uncle, go Green Bean. My nephew is so cool. Izuku smiled as the rest of his family reacted to the video, and his mom lightly scolded him for his language. He let them know that he was going to the corner store to pick up some burn cream, and his mom said she would treat him once he got there. He picked up a few different snacks before he made his way to the medical aisle, noticing a teenager in front of the burn cream. The boy had severe burns all across his face and arms, but Izuku was not going to stare. He knew firsthand how cruel the world was to those that were different. As he picked up some cream and other supplies, He watched the teen stuff a few things in his coat pockets. He's probably homeless. Izuku thought to himself sadly. It was cold outside, and it was probably uncomfortable trying to treat burns in this type of weather. Before Izuku could stop himself, he was speaking to the teen. "Excuse me?" The boy looked at Izuku in surprise, probably thinking that he was going to call him out for stealing. Izuku got a little closer, so that none of the workers would overhear. "I'd be happy to buy you anything you need, whether it's medical supplies or food." The older boy simply stared at Izuku for a long time, making it clear that no one had shown him simple kindness. That thought broke Izuku's heart, because he could relate. No one outside of his family was ever nice to him once they found out about his lack of a quirk. After a few silent minutes, the boy spoke again. "Why?" Izuku thought it over before replying. "Because I know how cruel this world can be. Let's grab a few things, then we can get some ramen." Nakaguro. Dabi was trying his best to stay under the radar, but it was hard when he was living on the streets and forced to steal to survive. His 18th birthday was 2 weeks away, and then he wouldn't have to worry about being sent back to his sperm donor if he ever got arrested. He didn't need anyone's help, and he didn't want it. At least that is what he had thought before a small boy with freckles and sparkling green eyes dragged him to a ramen shop and force-fed him. Izuku, as he insisted on being called, was an interesting kid. He opened up to Dabi about his life as a quirkless kid, talking about the bullying and suicide baiting. But then he talked about his family, the only people that actually believed in him. The kid was clearly trying to build some trust between the two of them, and he begrudgingly had to admit that it was working. Dabi felt a bit of pain in his chest, unable to imagine something like that. A family that supported and loved each other unconditionally. They talked a bit, and he was surprised by how comfortable he felt with the kid. Izuku was the same age as Shoto, but he seemed extremely mature for his age. "Do you have somewhere to sleep tonight?" Dabi looked at the boy, who was giving him a look that told him he wouldn't be able to reply with a lie. Not really. But I always figure something out." Izuku simply hummed before pulling his phone out. After a few moments, Izuku put the device back in his bag. "You're coming home with me." Dabi felt multiple emotions at the same time, but he refused to feel hopeful. This had to be too good to be true. What's the catch? He couldn't help but ask. Izuku gave him another look before responding. "Play video games with me. Kigo kind of sucks, and I need someone to help me beat a few multiplayer levels." The boy gave him a warm smile. "Oh, okay. I never really played them growing up, but I can figure them out." Izuku nodded before jumping off his stool, laying a few bills on the counter, and motioning for the teen to follow him. 20 minutes later, he was sitting in a warm living room being fretted over by Izuku's mom, who he immediately took a liking to. It truly felt like everything here was the complete opposite of his former home, his former life. The Midoriyas were warm, and he could feel the love between mother and son. Inko gave him some extra clothes, which apparently belonged to Izuku's uncle, so that he could shower and take care of his burns. The woman gently helped him treat the ones on his back before he slipped on the comfortable cat-eared hoodie. After they settled in, he was expecting them to ask him about why he was on the streets or where his burns came from, but he was pleasantly surprised when they gave him space. He ended up playing Mario Kart with Izuku late into the night. The younger boy said that it was a great entry point for new gamers, getting practice in multitasking and learning the controls. For the first time in his 17 years of life, Dabi felt like a kid. Nakaguro. When Shota received a text that Izuku picked up another stray, he was not at all surprised. He truly believes that his nephew will have amassed a small army of loyal followers by the time he was in high school. I can never let Nedsu meet the kid, or his mom for that matter. He had quickly learned that the Midoriyas were extremely kind and loyal, but they could be fierce when they needed to be. He was also certain that they were two of the smartest people in all of Japan. Introducing them to Nedsu may or may not lead to world domination. He and Hisashi had just left the store after picking up a few things for the kid Izuku brought home, including clothes and a few things for his room. Izuku had basically threatened everyone in the chat to ensure that they would not make the kid uncomfortable, and Inko thought it was best for Dabi to meet everyone in small clusters. They quickly made it to the Midoriya home, which was basically a second home to them all at this point, and Hisashi did his best to calm himself down before entering. I can't wait to meet my new nephew. Shota couldn't help but smile fondly at his husband. They haven't even met the kid, but he already seemed like he was part of the family. When he first laid eyes on the boy, he promised that he would rain hell on whoever had hurt him in the past. Scar tissue covered his entire body, and his eyes held a pain that no 17-year-old kid should know. What he was not expecting was for the kid to recognize him. Eraserhead. The kid's once dull eyes lit up in excitement. You know who I am, kid? Shoyuta wouldn't admit it, but he was a little proud that he could bring some life back into the kid's blue eyes. You actually saved me a few years ago when I first got on the streets. You're my favorite hero. Present Mike is really cool too though. You guys are real heroes. The boy shyly admitted. Shota could feel his husband physically vibrating in excitement next to him. Having both of their nephews as fans was honestly heartwarming. Oh God, I just met the kid and I'm already claiming him. Well, Dabi, you didn't tell me you liked Eraserhead. You can totally have some of my merch then. We can put it in your room. Izuku seemed excited that someone else shared his passion for the underground hero. Hitoshi had been commissioning custom Eraserhead merchandise to give to Izuku for a while now. Dabi's eyes widened at Izuku's statement. You're really letting me stay? Shota's heart broke at the boy's uncertainty, but before anyone could respond, Inko stepped in. Honey, you are a part of our family now. If you'd like to stay here with us, I will do everything in my power to make sure you are safe. She put a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder, and her eyes held a determined gaze. Upon first glance, many people think that Inko is simply a housewife. They would be very, very wrong. Inko owned a law firm that ruthlessly took down anything from corrupt corporations to abusive foster homes. The only reason that Izuku's schools were still standing was the boy's stubborn insistence that it would only make things worse. Although, Shoyuta was certain if the kid came home with burns or bruises ever again, the school would be burnt to the ground. So when Inko promised that she would make sure this kid was safe, she meant it. Dabi stared into Inko's eyes for a long moment, before his shoulders visibly relaxed. I'd really like that actually. Nakaguro. Izuku was so excited, he had a new brother. Dabi was a little nervous his first week with them, but he has slowly become more comfortable with the family. His mom called a few of her contacts and got new documents made for him, so his last name was officially Midoriya. They hadn't asked about his past, but Izuku knew he would come to them when he was ready. His older brother was enrolled in online school now, and he was working part-time at his mom's law firm helping out around the office. Uncle Sho and Uncle Zashi had come over a few times for dinner, but they had been holding off on bringing Rumi and Kigo over. Those two, especially when they were together, were a little much sometimes. Tonight was the fateful night. His other two siblings were coming over to play video games. They were told to be on their best behavior, but that could really mean anything when it came to the chaotic duo. Dabi was clearly a bit nervous. He was wearing Uncle Sho's cat hoodie that the boy had quickly claimed as his own. He usually wore it when he was feeling anxious or had a nightmare. Whenever he wore it around the man, Izuku noticed his uncle hiding a soft smile in his capture weapon. There was a knock on the door, and Izuku went to let Kigo and Rumi in. He was pleasantly surprised by their calm demeanor as they introduced themselves to Dabi. The older boy had a clear distrust of heroes, so he was happy that his siblings were approaching the situation delicately. After a few hours, Izuku saw that his worries were completely misplaced. As they played a few video games and ate pizza, it felt like Dabi had been a part of their family for years, instead of just a week. Kigo didn't get much of a childhood, with the commission training him daily to be the perfect hero for them. They had backed off now that he achieved their goals, so he was doing everything in his power to make up for lost time. He knew what it felt like to never celebrate your birthdays, to grow up without friends to go to the arcade with, to always have a sense of missing out. That's one of the reasons he and Izuku got along so well, and he could feel a kindred spirit in Dabi as well. The other boy had insisted on watching every training session Izuku had over the past 2 weeks, never taking his eyes off the kid. All of the heroes that worked with the boy were glad to have someone else to help keep an eye on him, but Kigo felt like there was more to it. Rumi had accidentally kicked Izuku into a wall the other day, expecting the kid to dodge. Dabi ran to the boy and blocked anyone from getting near him. He kept screaming that Izuku was just a kid, and he didn't calm down until it was confirmed that their younger brother was okay. His concern seemed to come from experience, not just from his new bond with the green-haired boy. Inko was able to find a doctor to help Dabi with most of his burns, but a few large scars still covered his torso. Burns like that didn't come from just living on the streets for a few years. Kigo wouldn't pressure the other teen to open up, but he'd be there if he needed him to. Their little makeshift family was currently sitting in the living room of the Yamada-Izawa household, ready to celebrate their newest addition's 18th birthday. The only members missing were Uncle Mike and Dabi, who were apparently finishing the birthday boys' look upstairs. Mama Midoriya was putting the finishing touches on the cake with Izuku, while Uncle Shota was talking to her about their progress in adopting a kid. Meeting Izuku and becoming close to him had convinced the couple that they wanted a kid of their own, someone close to their nephew's age. It was a long process, but they were almost done with all the background checks. Rumi was sitting on the couch next to Kigo, her legs bouncing up and down in excitement. Dabi had revealed that this would be the first time he ever celebrated his birthday, and Kigo sadly could relate. His first party was hosted by the Midoriya family only a few months prior. He and the rest of the family wanted to make the event special. Mike made his way down the steps, gesturing to get the family's attention. "Are you ready to see the birthday boy's killer makeover?" The blonde man was loud without even using his quirk, but it fit the occasion. Everyone, even Shota, cheered in anticipation. Hisashi moved to the side, revealing the most beautiful man that Kigo had ever seen. Dabi had always been quite attractive, but now he was mesmerizing. Newly dyed green hair complemented bright blue eyes, which were currently framed with black eyeliner. A leather jacket was wrapped around broad shoulders, and a dark gray t-shirt hugged his body. Black jeans with chains made up the bottom half of the outfit. Kigo noticed, with his breath hitching, that the other man sported a few new piercings. His lip, nose, and right eyebrow sported new rings, while studs dotted both ears. He was gorgeous. Kigo's heart was rapidly beating, and he barely heard the rest of the compliments given to the man in front of him. Izuku and Inko were standing in shock, wide smiles and tears streaming down their faces. Dabi became shy under their gaze, rubbing the back of his neck and looking to the ground with a small smile. "I thought since I'm a Midoriya now I might as well look the part." He laughed brightly as he was tackled into a hug by two blurs of green. The official story was that Dabi is Izuku's cousin that was orphaned a few years back and decided to come to stay with his auntie. Though Izuku was already claiming him as his new older brother, and it didn't seem like the newest Midoriya minded that much. Nakaguro. Dabi couldn't decide which emotions he was feeling exactly, he just knew that he felt warm. He looked around him, his new family laughing together and smiling. It was so different from anything he experienced growing up. His mom would sneak a small sweet into his room every year when he was a kid, after his dad had gone to bed. Fuyumi and Natsuo would find him small trinkets that he could easily hide from the old man. His birthdays always consisted of pain and loneliness. Now, though, he was surrounded by warmth and laughter. He was directed to sit on the couch as the group gathered his presence around him, and he felt a cluster of tears filling his eyes. He never thought he would feel safe around heroes again. "This is too much," he managed to choke out, eyeing the rather large pile of gifts set in front of him. Inko's warm arms wrapped around his shoulders before she placed a kiss on the top of his head. "Better get used to it then." She then placed one of the smaller bags into his lap. Before he pulled out whatever was inside, Dabi looked to his new family, making sure to meet each one of their gazes. "Thank you." They all gave him warm smiles as he dove into his gifts. When he was finished, he had piles of new clothes, a laptop, his own Eraserhead merch, leather boots, earphones, and countless items for his room. Kigo had gotten him a custom-made leather jacket, and he couldn't help but blush as he ran the expensive material through his fingers. He thought he had opened everything, but a box was quickly placed in front of him. "This one is a bit of a surprise for everyone, but I think you'll enjoy it." Mama Inko had a warm smile on her face as she placed the box in his hands. The group shared a few confused looks before the man began unwrapping the present. When he lifted the lid of the box, a key was revealed. Izuku, who was sitting next to him, looked at his mom with anticipation. "What's this, Mama?" Izuku questioned. Inko's eyes sparkled as she explained the key. Well, we have such a big family now, and our apartment was getting a bit cramped. So I thought we would all be much more comfortable in a house. What do you think, boys? Would you like to go see our new home? Cheers of surprise and excitement filled the room. Izuku had wrapped Dabi and Inko in a group hug, and tears fell down all three of their cheeks. He had never really cried until he joined this family, but he was happy to have yet another Midoriya trait. Nakaguro. The house was about 10 minutes away from their uncle's place, a bit closer than their old apartment was. It had 5 bedrooms, not including the finished attic space that Inko insisted Dabi have. You're an adult, darling. You should have your own space to enjoy. Inko said that the finished basement could be the boys' space, and they were already planning out what they would have down there. Izuku's room was much larger than his room in the apartment, and he knew he could fit a larger desk and some workout equipment in the extra space. The rest of the family was exploring the house, but Dabi was just staring at the key he was gifted. They want me to be a part of this family, and they've only known me for a little under 2 weeks. Determination filled him. He would tell them about his past. He knew this family would accept him. He wasn't ready to tell them exactly who his father was, but he could at least tell them his story. Mama Inko, once we're done here, can we all go back to Uncle Shota and Uncle Hizashi's house? I think it's time I told everyone about my past. Had approached Inko as she looked at their new backyard, and she turned to him in surprise. She quickly wrapped him in one of the warm hugs he was growing attached to, squeezing him once before she replied. Of course, sweetheart. I'll let everyone know, I'm happy you trust us enough to share. His eyes teared up at the unconditional support this woman had shown him in his time with the family. It was no wonder that Izuku was such an amazing kid. His mom was an angel. Dabi still loved his own mother, and he missed her every day. But Inko held another space in his heart. She was quickly taking over a motherly role in his life. After everything he went through in his life, he thought he might just deserve a little happiness after all. Nakaguro. The family once again sat in the living room of the Yamada Aizawa household, anticipating their talk with their newest family member. Dabi had changed back into his favorite cat-eared hoodie, which always brought a smile to his sleepy uncle's face. The teen was situated between Inko and Izuku on one of the couches, and Uncle Hizashi had brewed a pot of tea to help calm everyone's nerves. Kigo and Rumi were sitting together on one of the love seats, and both of them were prepared to destroy whoever hurt their newest addition. Dabi clutched his hands in front of him and took a steadying breath before he began. As you all know by now, I have a big distrust of heroes. That's because, my dad is a hero. I'm not ready to tell you who he is yet, but I'm ready to tell you about where I got my burns. Everyone had sat up when he mentioned his dad was a hero. A burning rage could be seen in their eyes. Dabi told his story, how his father bought his mom, how he was trained from the moment his quirk showed up. He told them about how his mother had a nervous break, how the rest of his siblings were ignored and neglected, how he ran away the day after his mother was locked away, and how he felt endless guilt for leaving his siblings with the man he despised. Everyone, even their normally stoic Uncle Sho, had tears pouring down their face as the boy recounted his abuse. Once he was done, he felt emotionally exhausted, but he had one more thing to say. I was on a really bad path before Izuku found me, and you all have saved me from that. I'm done letting him control my life. I'm done letting hate control me. You all have shown me that heroes can be good. I think I want to become a hero again. He finally looked up and met his family's eyes. He saw the determined gazes looking back at him, and he knew that they would do everything in their power to support his rediscovered dream. He also knew without a doubt, when he was ready to tell them, they would help him take down the flaming bastard that hurt him and his family. Everything seemed to be going well for the found family, although they seemed to be gaining new members every year or so. The Midoriyas had settled into their new home easily, and the rest of the family spent a majority of their time hanging out there. Dabi had been training with Aizawa to learn how to fight without using his self-destructive quirk. He would start apprenticing under the heroes in their family until he was ready to take the adult provisional licensing exam. Izuku had turned 12, and was excited that his family seemed to be growing as he grew up. His only concern was entering middle school, which would bring its own complications. Bakugo had left him alone, outside of a few rude words every now and then, but that didn't mean everyone stopped their harassment. But that was something to think about another time. The boy was currently sitting in the Yamada Aizawa living room with his mom and Dabi, preparing himself to meet his new cousin. His uncles had been wanting to adopt for a while, but everything was rushed when Uncle Sho found a boy hiding in an alley wearing a muzzle. The boy had been abused his entire life due to his villainous quirk, and Izuku could relate heavily. His uncles thought that he and Dabi would be the best people to introduce at first, as they both understood just how cruel the world could be. Uncle Zashi entered the house first, bringing in armfuls of bags from the shopping trip they just took with their new son. Izuku knew from experience that the blonde man could go crazy when he had a new person to shop for. Okay, listeners. Hitoshi likes to communicate using sign, but he can hear what you're saying. It might be nice if he saw you signing back to him though, so that he knows you understand. I'm gonna go put these upstairs, but Sho should be bringing him in any minute. Izuku was trying to contain his excitement, not wanting to startle the boy. He was excited to learn more about his quirk and practice his JSL. Dabi put a grounding hand on his knee, helping him calm down a bit. A few minutes later Uncle Sho walked into the house followed by a tall purple-haired boy with violet eyes. He looked extremely nervous, and Izuku noticed the scars on his neck and cheeks from being forced to wear a muzzle throughout his life. Izuku greeted him in sign, letting him know his name and welcoming him to the family. Dabi and their mom quickly followed suit, and a bit of the tension in Hitoshi's shoulders drained. He greeted them back, before being led into the living room to take a seat. Slowly, conversation broke out between the group, especially when Zashi came back downstairs. Izuku found out that his cousin really liked cats and coffee, just like his new dad. They talked about underground heroes and their mutual admiration for Eraserhead. As Izuku was getting ready to leave, Hitoshi came up to him looking nervous. "Bye Hitoshi, I'll text you later." Izuku signed to the newest member of his family. "Bye Izuku." It was only a whisper, but it brought tears to the eyes of everyone close enough to hear it. "Nakaguro Nakaguro. Purple problem child. Zuku, wanna come over to watch hero vids later? Papa and Dad said it was okay." Green problem child. "Yeah," laughing face. "Thanks for inviting me Toshi." Hitoshi had been with his new family for a few months now, and while he was still mostly communicating in sign he felt comfortable enough to speak from time to time. For the first month or so he fully expected to be sent back to foster care, or to be forced to wear a muzzle again. He never expected every single person in his family to love and accept him unconditionally. Izuku was his cousin, but he was also his best friend. The green-haired boy understood him in a way few others could. They were each other's first friends, and Izuku never once treated him like a future villain in the making. He was already getting used to all the new parts of his life. Training and naps on the couch with his dad. Shopping trips and baking with his papa. Waking up with cats surrounding him and the smell of fresh coffee filling the house. Learning how to analyze heroes and playing video games with Izuku. Arcade trips and sparring competitions with Rumi, Kigo and Dabi. Warm hugs and support from Auntie Inko. All of them believed he could be a hero, and were helping him train to reach his goals. He would never take his family for granted. Nakaguro Nakaguro. Izuku and Hitoshi had just finished watching the fight between a new hero and a group of small-time villains when Uncle Zashi came into the living room with an excited smile. "Hey kiddos. Our friend Tensei is in town for a bit and was wondering if he and his brother could stop by. Tenya is your age, but if you'd rather us meet somewhere outside of the house we could do that too." Mike knew that the boys were hesitant about people their age, never knowing when they would be ridiculed or accepted. Hitoshi signed his concerns to the man. "Will he be okay with our quirk status?" A determined gleam filled the hero's eyes at his son's question. "If he's not, then he will not be welcome in our home. We got your backs, little listeners." He ruffled both of their hair affectionately. "I'm fine with it if Toshi is. If he's mean to Toshi I'll just kick his ass." As Izuku got older he had picked up Rumi's unfortunate cursing habit, but only utilized it when necessary. Someone potentially being quirkist against his cousin seemed like the perfect opportunity for a well-placed curse. "I'm going to let the curse go because I agree with the sentiment. While I probably shouldn't endorse you beating up another kid, I will let you use your discretion if he is being quirkist to you or Hitoshi." If Sho or your mom ask, I didn't say anything, okay? The boys nodded to show their understanding, and Izuku was excited to potentially make a new friend. But if this Tenya kid was an asshole, he'd happily use him to practice the new flip Rumi taught him the other day. Nakaguro Nakaguro. Izuku and Hitoshi sat in the living room with Sho, Zashi, and Midnight. Midnight, or Auntie Namuri as she insisted on being called, had been over more after Hitoshi was adopted. She also went to school with Izuku's uncles, and was a teacher at UA. Although Izuku didn't see her as much, he still really enjoyed her company, and he was currently helping her redesign her costume a bit. So, Izuku, Shota told me you recently added throwing knives to your training. Have you ever thought about learning to use a whip? Izuku thought about it for a moment. A whip could be utilized like Eraserhead scarf, and could be something useful to add to his arsenal. Who could teach him though? He thought for a few more moments before his eyes widened. Would you teach me, Auntie? The woman's face turned into a bright smile at his excitement. She wouldn't admit it out loud, but she had been trying to find any excuse to spend more time with her nephews. Of course. Hitoshi, you're more than welcome to join as well. I'll talk to the rest of the family to figure out when we can start. How does that sound? The boys nodded in excitement. Hitoshi had quickly joined Izuku's training when all of the heroes found out about the boy's dream to become a hero. Since Izuku had been training for years, they started him out at the basics, but he was learning quickly. He had yet to win a spar against Izuku, much to the purple-haired boy's chagrin. Their discussion of training was interrupted by a knock at the door, which Zashi got up to answer. Tensei! Mike almost activated his quirk in his excitement to see their friend. Hizashi! The man screamed back. The two men scrambled into a hug, falling onto the floor in their glee. Shota rolled his eyes and went to grab his husband and best friend off the ground, before they broke anything. Once they were calmed down, they entered the living room for introductions. Izuku and Hitoshi had already made a deal that if the conversation turned to quirks, Izuku would reveal his quirklessness first. If either of the brothers reacted poorly to this, they would leave and Hitoshi would keep his quirk to himself. The boy was still getting used to having love and support. There was no reason to expose him to hate anytime soon. Are these the kids I always hear so much about? Tensei gave them a bright smile after he finished greeting Shota and Namuri. Yeah. This is our son Hitoshi and our nephew Izuku. Boys, this is our good friend Iida Tensei and his little brother Tenya. Mike introduced everyone. The boys politely bowed, and were quickly mirrored by the two brothers. It is nice to meet you both. I look forward to making your acquaintance over this visit. Tenya spoke robotically, swinging his arms in mechanical movements. Izuku was a little surprised by the boy's formality, but wrote it off. He had plenty of weird personality traits. He wouldn't judge someone for theirs. The group fell into easy conversation before Tensei brought up Izuku and Hitoshi's training. So how is training going, boys? I hear you have quite a few pros teaching you. It is really impressive that you are this dedicated at such a young age. The older Iida brother had an infectious energy and smile, and Izuku could see why so many people enjoyed being his sidekick. There was something about the man that made you automatically trust him. Izuku was the first to reply, letting Hitoshi think over his words for a moment. It can be pretty intense, but I'm so grateful that they are willing to take time out of their schedules for us. Hitoshi has been making great progress in the short time he's been training with me. He gave his cousin a warm smile as he began to interpret the boy's jizzle. Hitoshi said that he feels sore in places he never knew could hurt, but he's extremely grateful for everyone's work to help him reach his goals. Tensei revealed that he and Tenya were both fluent in JSO, so the conversation flowed from there. If I may ask, are you doing any quirk training? Tenya's innocent question made everyone but he and his brother tense. This was a big moment, and Izuku channeled his inner Kigo. He was laid back and confident, not caring what anyone thought about him or his lack of a quirk. Oh, I'm not, but Hitoshi is. Can't train something you don't have. I'm quirkless. He did his best impersonation of his older sister's smirk. Well, that just makes everything you're doing even more impressive. Tensei smiled warmly at Izuku, but Tenya shuffled uncomfortably. Wait, how can you become a hero if you do not have a quirk? He looked at his brother in confusion. Hitoshi stiffened next to him, and he could see Zashi's hand grasp Uncle Sho's wrist. Auntie Namuri looked ready to pounce at any moment. They would let Izuku handle it for now, knowing that he preferred to fight his own battles. There have been quirkless heroes in other countries. Japan just seems to be behind in that regard. But I will be proud to become the first quirkless hero in the country when the time comes. Izuku made sure he spoke with confidence. He wouldn't let the boy in front of him question his dreams, not when everyone in his family supported him. He was not only questioning Izuku, but he was questioning his family's ability to see potential. Tenya still seemed confused, while Tensei was looking at his brother with disappointment. Tensei was about to say something before Shota interrupted. "Tenya, how long have you been training?" The boy seemed confused by the sudden change of topic, but replied quickly. "I started about 5 months ago, but I feel like I have learned a great deal so far. I look forward to furthering my training." A grin that sent chills down most people's spines grew on the tired man's face. Izuku grinned when he realized what his uncle was going to say. "Well, if that's the case, why don't we set up a spar between you and Izuku? Then he'd be able to see how difficult it is to fight against opponents with quirks." Feral smiles filled the faces of Izuku, Hitoshi, Auntie Namuri, and his 2 uncles. Tenya seemed ready to argue, but his brother quickly jumped in. "Just let us know when and where. I'm sure this could be a great learning experience." Tensei turned to Izuku and winked. At least Izuku wouldn't have to worry about Tensei being angry when he beat his little brother's ass into the ground. Nakaguro Nakaguro. Shota liked to pride himself on his logical approach to life, but he wouldn't deny that he was petty to a fault. Watching as Tenya questioned Izuku, a kid with endless potential, so unapologetically activated all of his protective instincts. If the kid wanted to be a hero like his brother, he would have to learn that quirks weren't everything. The best way to learn those types of lessons was through getting your ego crushed, and Shota was happy to facilitate that. They were currently at Kigo's agency in one of the sparring gyms, and everyone was there waiting to watch Izuku kick ass. Knowing the kid, he wouldn't be surprised if he walked away with a new friend after throwing him into the ground. Izuku was currently completing his warm-up stretches while they waited for the Iidas to arrive. "Hey guys!" Tensei called as he and his brother entered the gym. Tenya looked concerned, like he was worried this fight would be unfair. Little did he know he was the one that was actually at a disadvantage. Shota and Hizashi had been talking about Izuku for a long time, so Tensei knew the boy's combat capabilities. At 12 years old, he was able to pin his pro-hero family members every once in a while. Shota knew his friend also wanted his brother to be humbled, and they would all enjoy watching it. The boys finished up their warm-ups after 20 minutes, and then the show was ready to start. The boys walked over to their respective corners before the match began, Izuku looking confident yet focused. "Give him hell, Izuku," Rumi whispered in his ear before sitting back down. Hizashi was the one to call the start of the match, and Izuku immediately became a blur of speed. Before Tenya could even make his first move, he was pinned to the ground with Izuku's knee to his chest. The kid's mouth was gaping and his eyes were wide, shocked by the speed of his opponent. Izuku stood, his expression neutral as he helped the other boy up. Shota was proud of his nephew's humility, letting his skills speak for themselves. "May we go again?" Tenya requested, shock still evident on his face. The boy clearly wanted to see if their first match was a fluke. After he was pinned 5 times in a row, the boy seemed to get the message. All of the adults were wearing expressions of pride for Izuku, but also holding back their laughter at Tenya's expense. Dabi and Inko were wearing matching grins, showing that the boy really was a Midoriya at heart. As soon as the final match was called, Tenya dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead to the ground in a deep bow. Izuku, clearly surprised by the gesture, stood stiffly in front of him. "Midoriya, I am deeply sorry for my words and doubts about your abilities. You have truly shown me that my beliefs were misguided and harmful. I do not expect forgiveness, but I must apologize for my actions and any harm they may have brought upon you." Tensei smiled proudly at his little brother, while the rest of the group knew exactly what would happen next. Izuku walked over to the boy and knelt in front of him, placing a hand on his shoulder so that he would look up. Tenya's head quickly shot up. He was clearly not expecting Izuku to come to him. Izuku stood once again and reached out his hand, his previously neutral face molding into a bright smile. Friends? Tenya's shocked expression morphed into a warm smile as he grasped the outreached hand and stood. I would be honored to be considered your friend. Izuku called Hitoshi over, the three boys chatting as the adults watched on. Tensei discreetly handed a few bills over to Shota, shaking his head in awe. When you said that kid could befriend anyone, I really thought you were lying. Shota pocketed the bills and watched as his nephew and son welcomed Tenya into their lives. That kid's gonna change the world one day. Kigo prided himself on being cool under pressure, even the most powerful villains never made him crack. But apparently his chill personality was limited when it came to Midoriya Dabi lifting his shirt to wipe the sweat from his brow after an intense spar. He felt his jaw drop open, and he had to quickly shut it before the blue-eyed man looked his way. I am a hero, I need to get it together. His heart felt like it would burst out of his chest at any moment, so he turned away from Shota and Dabi's sparring session. If he didn't, he was fully convinced he'd pass out at any moment. The number 3 hero taken out by a crush, wouldn't that be something? It was difficult to keep cool when the muscles on the green-haired man were growing more and more defined over his months of training. He was letting his hair grow out a bit, keeping it out of his face in a small bun while he fought. He had been finding his own style, with the help of Hizashi, and it was all slowly becoming far too much for Kigo's poor heart to handle. He didn't even know if Dabi liked guys, and even if he did, would he want to be with someone like Kigo? After heroes had failed the man so much, he'd probably never want one as a romantic partner. But that didn't mean Kigo's traitorous heart got the memo, so he was resigned to silently pining over the older Midoriya brother until he got over it. If he got over it, his grim thoughts were interrupted by his phone alarm going off, alerting him that it was time to go pick up Hitoshi and Izuku from Midnight's agency. Hey guys, I'm headed out to grab the kiddos. If you need anything, just let one of the staff know. He made his way out of the gym and headed to a nearby window. His found family used his agency as a base of operations, and his collaboration with Rumi helped them both jump in the rankings. Dabi mostly interned under him and Shota, so the personal gym in his office was used for training and spars. It was common to see Hitoshi, Izuku, and Tenya studying or hanging out somewhere in the building, and Inko would sometimes bring him a home-cooked meal when he was stuck on a difficult case. If you would have told him his life would be filled with so many wonderful people a few years ago, he would never believe you. He smiled as he pressed a button on the wall and the window opened, allowing him to jump into the air and make his way across town. Being in the air always made him feel so free, and he did a few spins to humor the citizens looking up at him with admiration. He landed in front of Midnight's agency, quickly entering the building before a crowd could form around him. Luckily he remembered to bring a disguise this time, as Hitoshi still got a little anxious when fans crowded around any of his caretakers when he was with them. After greeting the receptionist, he made his way to the gym where the boys were having their first lesson in the art of whips. As he approached the door, he had to hold in his giggles when he heard the commotion inside. Oh, that hurt you, Dick. Izuku's voice shouted, quickly followed by Hitoshi's cackling. Izuku, while I appreciate the passion, watch the language. Namuri tried to chide, but the laughter in her voice showed that she was amused by the kid's insult. I wonder where he learned that type of language, maybe a certain rabbit hero that we know? Kigo chuckled as he entered the room. It couldn't have been my sweet older sister, she would never use such language. Izuku clutched his chest, his tone sarcastic. My mistake. Rumi is the most innocent one out of all of us. They all snorted. Before we head home, why don't you show me your skills with your whips? You're asking us to show you something that doesn't exist. Hitoshi joked. Namuri gasped at Hitoshi's self-doubt. Hey, I'm a pretty great teacher. You both have made great progress in only one session. It takes time to get used to it. Why don't you show Kigo something simple? The boys begrudgingly agreed, and Hitoshi stepped onto the training mat so that his whip would not hit his audience. He lifted his arm above his head and flung it forward in a fluid motion, the resulting snap ringing through the room. Kigo whistled. That was actually pretty cool. Maybe I can incorporate a whip into my fighting style. Namuri side-eyed him. Good luck with that. Before Kigo could defend himself, she clapped and her smile once again brightened. Alright, little Izuku. It's your turn. Hitoshi and Izuku switched places, and Izuku's brow tightened in concentration. Kigo expected some complex trick from the child genius. The kid soaked in information like a sponge. He learned new moves in less than a day, quickly incorporating them into his fighting style as though they had always been there. He had no doubt that he would take to his newest weapon with the same skill. Oh, how wrong he was. Izuku's arms snapped forward, but the whip seemed to have a mind of its own. Instead of straightening out all the way, it snapped back halfway through its arch and hit him in the middle of his forehead. Nemuri ran to him in concern, but Hitoshi and Kigo were on the ground cackling at Izuku's misfortune. They knew he was fine, although his pride was probably more than a bit bruised. After his aunt checked him over, he gave the two figures on the ground an unamused glare. You two are the worst. Hitoshi shrugged, while Kigo stood and ruffled Izuku's hair. Sure, we are squirt. Now, who wants ice cream before we head home for dinner? Nakaguro. Izuku strays. Uncle Sleepy, would everyone be available to come over for dinner tonight? Hizashi and I have something exciting to share. Mama Midoriya, we'll be there. Smiley face. Dabi is with Rumi, but he said he'd be home in time for dinner, so I believe he will be there as well. Angry Bunny, me and the emo Midoriya will be there. Emo bro, I still resent that nickname. Chicken Nugget, if I can deal with Chicken Nugget, you can deal with being called emo. Smiley face. I'll be there. Tensei and I are still going over the case, but we'll be done before dinner time. Zoom, Tenya and I will be there. Izuku was curious, what could his uncles be announcing tonight? Are they getting another kid? He knew he had to go to the only person who might give him insider info. Problem children. Green problem child. Toshi, do you know what the dinner is about? Purple problem child. My lips are sealed. Blue problem child. Izuku, surely you can wait until dinner time. Green problem child. Tenya, you overestimate me and my patience. Blue problem child. I sometimes forget how chaotic you are, that is my mistake. Izuku chuckled at Tenya's response before pocketing his phone. It seemed that he really would have to wait until dinner, based on Hitoshi's response. Ugh, I guess I'll go on a run or something so I don't obsess over it. A few hours later, he sat on the floor of his uncle's house with Tenya and Hitoshi, waiting for the adults to join them in the living room. Izuku was practically buzzing with anticipation. Alright, dinner should be finishing up soon, so we'll make our announcement and then dig in. Mike announced to the room, much louder than necessary. Dabi ruffled Izuku's hair as he walked by, and warmth blossomed in the boy's chest. He couldn't imagine his life without his older brother, and he hoped he would never have to. Once everyone was sitting, Shota and Hizashi made their way to the front of the room. I know that Rumi, Kigo, and Tensei received invitations to UA's sports festival this year, but they are not allowed to bring guests. Izuku remembered everyone's disappointed faces when they found out they would not be able to attend as a family. Cheer up, listeners. Today we got confirmation that your favorite uncle is announcing the fest and can bring whoever he wants. Mike made jazz hands to make it clear he was talking about himself. Shota rolled his eyes fondly as the rest of the room cheered. Really? We get to go to the sports festival? Izuku was jumping up and down, having dragged Hitoshi and Tenya up with him. All three boys had wide smiles on their faces, excited to spend the day together and with their families. Yeah, and you get to sit in a super cool VIP section with the UA staff. They've been dying to meet the three of you. Mike wrapped the three boys in a hug, gesturing for Shota to join as well. The man begrudgingly made his way over, but the way he melted into the hug revealed his true feelings. Nakaguro. Kigo, Rumi, Tenya, and Hitoshi spent the night at the Midoriya household the day before the sports festival. Izuku would always be grateful that the two top 10 heroes still made time to hang out with him even with their busy schedules. He was especially excited to analyze the heroes in training he saw today, and Uncle Sho said that if he did a good job he'd use the analysis to help his students. They were all going to meet at UA a few hours before the festival started so that Izuku could meet the rest of the staff. He was instructed to steer clear of the principal, for whatever reason, but he would always trust both of his uncle's judgment. Tensei met them at the house, and the kids were shocked to see a limo waiting out front for them. I thought we should ride into your first sports festival experience in style. The man waved his arms wildly at the giant car, and everyone laughed as they saw the disco ball creating sparkles around the interior. Only you would rent out a limo for a school competition. Dabi tried to sound unamused, but it was clear that he was trying to hold in his laugh as Rumi and Kigo made ridiculous poses in front of him. You're just not used to riding in style, emo boy. Rumi popped one of the bottles of apple cider and filled up a glass, passing it to Inko before distributing the rest of them. This is awesome. Izuku cheered as he clinked his glass with Hitoshi and Tenya. You kids are in for a real treat. The sports fest is always a wild time. I wonder what Nedzu cooked up this year. Kigo had a mischievous glint in his eye, and Izuku once again wondered what the principal of UA was actually like. The limo ride over was chaotic, with spontaneous sing-alongs to whatever was playing on the radio as well as Tensei and Rumi having a tickle fight. Tenya made sure to let them know how childish their antics were, but his smile gave away his amusement. When they pulled up to the arena, Izuku was surprised to see other limos in front of them, wondering if the occupants were heroes or wealthy families. He saw Dabi tense as Endeavor, the number 2 hero, exited his limo and made his way inside. Note to self, we must avoid Endeavor at all costs today. Dabi still hadn't revealed who his father was, but Izuku had his suspicions. Once the truth came out, he'd happily help take down the abrasive flame hero. When it was their turn to exit, the flashing of cameras made Izuku and Hitoshi hide behind Kigo's wings. When they were safely wrapped inside the familiar feathers, the group made their way inside the building. Sorry about that, I should have warned you there would be reporters. Tensei apologized with a grimace. Izuku briefly wondered if Bakugo would see pictures of him surrounded by heroes and friends, and chuckled when he imagined the explosive tantrum it would cause. He had kept his training and family a secret from his classmates in elementary school, not wanting to deal with accusations of lying or creating fairy tales. The truth would eventually come out, but he was happy to keep his family to himself for now. There were so many people who believed he could be a hero. Why taint that with the taunts and ridicule he experienced from his classmates and teachers? He was shaken out of his thoughts when he saw his uncles walking towards them with smiles, or in Uncle Show's case a grin hidden in his capture scarf. Are you guys ready for an awesome day? Mike used his quirk on the last part of the sentence, causing the group to cover their ears. He blushed and smiled sheepishly. Sorry about that, I'm just super excited to introduce the family to everyone here. Shota gave his husband a disapproving look before gesturing for the group to follow him. The 2 rules for today are to keep Izuku away from the rat god principal and to not embarrass us. Instead of looking at the 3 children, Shota shot a pointed glare at Kigo, Rumi, Tensei, and Dabi. Hey, I get dragged against my will into their chaos. Don't blame me, Uncle Sho. Dabi proclaimed as his friends laughed around him. Everyone knew he enjoyed being included in their antics, especially anything involving Kigo. I wish they would just confess to each other already. All this pining is ridiculous. Izuku thought to himself as he watched Kigo smile at his older brother. The 2 older men might think they were being subtle in their crushes, but they were not. His mom was already taking bets on how long it would take them to finally get together. They made their way through the vast hallways of UA, a building Izuku was vaguely familiar with. Some of his training involved visiting the campus, specifically its giant cities, but they hadn't used the gyms here since Kigo came into their lives. After a few minutes of walking, they made it to the teacher's lounge. Everyone is really nice, but if you guys start to feel overwhelmed, just let us know. We can keep touring the school or sit in a quiet classroom if anything becomes too much for you. Mike smiled at the 3 boys, showing that he was being genuine in his offer. All of the adults put the boys' well-being first, something they were very grateful for. They were led into the room, and a group of heroes sat around a table with tea and snacks ready to enjoy. My boys! Nemuri leaped up and hugged them. Tenya chose not to join their whip lessons, but their aunt also taught them about hero personas and identity. They learned about the spectrums of sexuality and gender, consent, and anything else she thought would be appropriate for 12-year-old boys. It was nice to have role models that were women, especially when they were as strong as Rumi, Nemuri, and Inko. After the group hug, they made their way into the room to meet the rest of the heroes. Izuku began nerding out about their quirks almost immediately, asking them to sign his analysis pages on them. You weren't lying when you told us this kid is wicked smart. Snipe chuckled as he finished signing the book. Izuku blushed at the praise he received from the staff. Lunch Rush promised to cook a serving of katsudon for Izuku when it was time for lunch so that the boy could note the flavors in his journal. Vlad King and Ectoplasm answered all of his questions and were pleasantly surprised by the lack of fear in the boy's eyes. They were used to not having many young fans, but Izuku treated them just like any other hero. 13 and Power Loader got into a discussion about physics with Izuku, which had to be interrupted by Inko and Shota before it got too out of hand. Recovery Girl and Hound Dog offered to teach Dabi, Izuku, Hitoshi, and Tenya advanced medical and mental health first aid. The boys already planned their first lessons, excited to gain another skill towards their future career as pro heroes. It was finally time to head to the festival grounds, but Izuku had one more favor to ask. Snipe, do you mind if I ask you a question? Izuku's confidence had improved greatly over the years, but he was still a bit nervous around new people. The staff all knew he was quirkless, and they had been very kind so far, but that could be because his entire family was there to watch over their interactions. Absolutely, little cowboy. What can I do for you? The man's mask covered his expression, but the hero radiated kindness and patience. It definitely helped Izuku steel his nerves. I'm very interested in learning gun safety and potentially incorporating them into my fighting style. Would you be willing to give me a few lessons? He hoped his request wouldn't be too much, but his uncles assured him that Snipe would appreciate his interest. Absolutely. As long as your mama is okay with it, I'd love to take you on as a student. He had expected the response to take a little bit of thought, but the man responded almost immediately. Izuku's face broke out into a bright grin, excited to work with another mentor and learn a new weapon. Thank you. My mom is okay with it, but she would like to speak to you before we set up lessons. It doesn't have to be today, though. We might be able to find some time in between events, but I'm happy to talk to her whenever you need me to. They followed the rest of the group into the hall to start making their way over to the VIP area. As Izuku sat surrounded by people that cared about him, getting to know his new mentor and watching young heroes in training showing off their skills, he couldn't help but feel like his dreams were closer than ever. Nakaguro. Arima Isamu, otherwise known as the pro hero Snipe, was a tough teacher. Guns were a dangerous weapon and he'd do everything in his power to make sure his students were safe when using them. He would not tolerate students goofing around and endangering others. He always expected new students to be fearful when they first picked up a gun, especially for a kid as young as Midoriya. For years he's heard about the boy, and he was surprised when Aizawa said the kid had more potential than most hero students that came through UA. It was rare that the grumpy hero gave such high praise, especially for a 12-year-old. Isamu had been curious, and after meeting the boy he wanted to learn more. When the kid asked him for gun lessons, he jumped on the opportunity. The little sharpshooter clearly had discipline and passion, and Isamu would be honored to help hone his skills. It didn't hurt that Midoriya Inko was a kind, strong, and beautiful woman that he had immediately taken an interest in. He was waiting at UA's gun range and was pleasantly surprised when his new student arrived 10 minutes early. It seemed he had adopted Eraserhead's mantra that being on time is being late. Hey cowboy, are you ready for your first lesson in gun safety? He gestured for the boy to follow him into the building. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of research over the past week and I'm excited to see what is applicable. He pulled a notebook out of his book bag, and Isamu was starting to sense a theme. The analysis he had on the UA staff was impressive, better than some professionals. This new journal must be for breaking down the skills he'd learn in training, and Isamu was once again impressed. Not many students took training that seriously. He could already tell why Eraserhead and Mic had such a soft spot for the green-haired boy. Wow! Midoriya exclaimed as they walked into the main area of the shooting range. UA didn't spare any expense when it came to training facilities, and the range was no exception. Isamu chuckled as he watched his student turn in a circle to take everything in. 30 lanes were lined up against the far end of the building, perfect for testing out a range of weaponry and targeted quirks. Screens at each station gave you feedback on your performance and gave suggestions on how to improve. A bulletproof window separated the main area from the weapons room, where a variety of guns and other ranged weapons sat on display. This was his happy place, and he was excited that the kid appreciated it. Now, I want you to get a firm foundation before we move on to weapons with more firepower. Let's start you off with a 9mm and move up from there. They entered the armory and picked out a few guns for him to try. After about 2 hours of practice, it was clear that Midoriya was a natural gunslinger. Isamu quickly realized over the course of the lesson that he not only gained a new student but potentially a son as well. Midoriya, please come here for a moment. His homeroom teacher requested with a sickly sweet smile. He had learned over the past few weeks that this meant he was about to be humiliated in front of his classmates. Yes, Nakamura-sensei? He tried to project as much innocence as he could muster. If he showed the tiniest bit of annoyance, this entire situation would end up with him suspended or worse. Please explain to me how you got a perfect score on the last math test. She pushed the paper towards him, her voice carrying around the room. Everyone quieted down so they could hear the conversation. I studied for it, sensei. He couldn't help the sassy retort, annoyed at his teacher once again questioning his intelligence. The woman's smile fell, a grimace replacing the fake concern originally painting her face. Well, I am not sure how someone as developmentally stunted as yourself could get the highest score in your class without cheating. I also don't appreciate your attitude, Midoriya. Why don't you go to the principal's office and see what he thinks about this? His stomach clenched, knowing that he'd be subjected to in-school suspension. They never let him carry out his suspensions at home, knowing it'd be a break from his torment. Yes, sensei. He ground out, rage filling him. His family had told him countless times that he should leave this school system, but he knew he had to be strong. This was only a fraction of what he would experience as a quirkless pro hero. As he walked to his desk to grab his things, he mentally went over the process of taking apart and rebuilding different guns, a habit he had gotten into when he needed to calm down. A foot shot out in front of him, but his instincts were far too quick for that. He accidentally stomped on it, grimacing at the yelp his classmate let out. Sorry. He let out, immediately feeling guilty at purposefully hurting someone else. The other boy looked at him with wide eyes for a moment, clearly seeing him in a new light for the first time. Izuku moved on before the interaction could go any further, grabbing his things and making his way to the principal. He slid into the bathroom to send a quick text to the family group chat. Izuku strays. Green bean, I'm probably going to be late for dinner, getting sent to the principal's office for getting a perfect score on my math test. Yeehaw, why do I have a feeling this isn't so the principal can congratulate you on your performance? Green bean, apparently it's suspicious that someone so developmentally stunted got such a good grade. Uncle Loud, little listener. You shouldn't force yourself to deal with this. Please let us help you. Uncle Sleepy, who said that to you? I need a name. Emo bro. They said what? Angry Bunny, do you want me to pick you up Zuku? Maybe I can teach them a little lesson, smiley face. Chicken Nugget, somehow Rumi using that emoji is terrifying. But I agree with the sentiment. Zoom zoom. Izuku, there is a place for you with Tenya and Hitoshi at Somei whenever you want it. You don't have to deal with this treatment, kiddo. Green Bean, if I can't handle this, how can I handle being a quirkless pro? Izuku pocketed his phone, leaving the restroom so he wouldn't be too late for his impromptu meeting with Principal Tanaka. He noticed a few new texts in their problem children chat, but he'd deal with those when this was over. He appreciated that his family always had his back, but they could never really understand his point of view. No matter what, there would always be people that would use his quirkless status as a reason to hate him. He refused to give them the satisfaction of letting it get to him. Nakaguro. Your form was a little sloppy this round. Uncle Shota reached his hand out to Dabi, who was sprawled out on the floor in the gym at Kigo's agency. The man helped him up to a sitting position before walking towards their bags. His training initially brought back memories from his childhood, but therapy paired with the encouragement of his family helped him move past it. The training sessions never went too far, and his well-being was always prioritized. Dabi was viewed as a human being first, not a tool that could be utilized in the future. Sorry about that, Uncle Sho. I'll do better next round. Uncle Shota threw him a water bottle, taking a long swig of his own before he responded. I know you will, kid. He ruffled Dabi's hair before he sat next to him. Dabi chugged the entire bottle in one go, the cool feeling of the beverage invigorating him for the next hour or so of training. I think you're ready, Shota said, looking at him with a small grin and eyes filled with pride. He couldn't possibly mean what I think he means. Are ready? For another spar? Dabi asked, not wanting to get his hopes up too much. His uncle simply chuckled. For the provisional licensing exam. All of us agree, you've made so much progress in a short time. If you want, I can put in your recommendation tomorrow. Dabi felt like he couldn't breathe, so many emotions running through his mind at once. The hero next to him, the person he looked up to, believed he could be a hero on his own terms. Kigo, Rumi, Tensei, Uncle Zashi, and Isamu all believed he could be a hero. He tried to fight the tears in his eyes, but when his uncle pulled him into a tight hug they flowed freely down his cheeks. He nodded. There were too many thoughts floating around his mind for him to respond verbally. Don't tell Inko and Izuku though, I don't want to disappoint them if I fail. He wiped his eyes as he pulled away from the hug. His uncle gave him a look but nodded. I don't know why you're doubting yourself, but I'll make sure none of us spill the secret. After a few more minutes of rest, they hopped up to begin another spar. This time Dabi went after the underground hero with everything he had, a new sense of determination guiding him. As he stood over his uncle in victory, he knew he'd do everything in his power to pass this exam. He would not disappoint the people that believed in him. Nakaguro. Suku. Over here. Tenya called as soon as he entered their favorite cafe. Izuku spotted a familiar head of purple hair at the table as well and smiled as he made his way to his best friends. Oh, little Izuku, how are you, kid? Mr. Kobayashi called from behind the counter. Hi, Mr. Kobayashi. I'm doing well, how is business? Izuku gave the man a bright smile. He and his mother had been going to this cafe for years, and the Bakugos had joined them numerous times after the boys played together at the neighborhood park. Sometimes the familiar smells and decor made his heart ache, but he had friends who actually cared about him and accepted him. He would never regret standing his ground against the explosive blonde, but he occasionally missed the days when things were simple between them. He finished walking over to his friends, grinning when he realized they had already ordered his favorite combo of taro boba and red bean mochi. Thanks, guys. He took an appreciative sip of the purple drink before asking them about their days. Although the three boys went to two different schools, they still hung out almost every day. On the days they couldn't hang out or study together, they filled the group chat with stories about their days and memes. Izuku was impressed by how quickly Tenya and Hitoshi had grown out of their shells. He felt like their friendship had done so much to build his confidence around people his own age, and he hoped he had helped them in some way as well. They chatted about their school days, Tenya and Hitoshi explaining that their English teacher went off on unrelated tangents every class. Izuku talked about the hero that visited his class that day. The woman, who went by the hero name Ivy, knew Rumi and Kigo very well. She realized Izuku was their kid brother, but luckily didn't say anything in front of the class. When she asked to speak with him after, he was met with glares from his teacher and classmates. He left that part out of the story. He also left out that he received detention for taking attention away from the students with powerful quirks and tricking a pro hero into thinking he was worth speaking to. The atmosphere was relaxed. They were the only customers in the cafe at the moment. When the bell above the door rang, Izuku didn't even think to turn around. Deku! A familiar voice called behind him, and his body instinctively stiffened when he heard the nickname. Bakugo had left him alone ever since their confrontation, sticking to the occasional verbal insults. The bullying still persisted even without the boy's direct influence, but at least he no longer had to feel explosions against his skin on a daily basis. Oh, Bakugo! Izuku briefly acknowledged the boy behind him, watching as Hitoshi and Tenya scowled. They had never met Izuku's ex-childhood friend, but they had heard the stories. Who are these extras? Bakugo glared at the strangers, clearly trying to hide his curiosity. These extras are my friends. Izuku couldn't mask the irritation in his voice. He wanted to escape the torment he experienced at school, and now it was glaring at him and his friends. Yamazawa Hitoshi, pleasure to meet you. The last part of the sentence was spat out. The displeasure in the purple-haired boy's voice was apparent. Iida Tenya. Tenya introduced himself stiffly. His usual propensity for politeness had been forgotten in the face of his best friend's bully. Why are you hanging out with a quirkless loser like Deku? Bakugo growled out, sending a pointed glare at the green-haired boy. It'd be a little strange for me to not hang out with my own cousin, but I'd probably still be best friends with Izuku even if we weren't related. Hitoshi emphasized his real name, clearly irritated with the insult the blonde was using. While Hitoshi and Izuku weren't blood-related, they still considered themselves family. Izuku was proud of Hitoshi for speaking so much to a stranger. The once mute boy had grown so much in his time with Shota and Hisashi. Yes, I am honored to have Izuku as a friend. Tenya added with an icy tone. Bakugo's eyes widened a bit at their casual use of Izuku's given name, but he quickly played it off. I know the nerd doesn't have any cousins or friends. I don't know what lies he's told you, but he's a useless loser. Before his two friends could respond in his defense, Izuku's worst nightmare came true. Bakugo, who are you talking to? It's Deku. Evil smiles came across the faces of the three boys that joined Bakugo when they realized their favorite target was sitting in front of them. I'm surprised they serve your kind here, Deku. Tsubasa mocked. What a despicable thing to say. Tenya stood, his brows clenched in anger. It was rare that the boy lost his cool, but discrimination of any kind filled him with rage. He had learned his lesson and was happy to teach the same lesson to anyone who intended to mock his best friend. I think it's time for you all to leave. Hitoshi growled, his glare reminiscent of Uncle Shota's. Guys, it's okay. Their words don't bother me anymore. Izuku lied, hoping the group of bullies would leave so that they could go back to enjoying their drinks and conversation. How'd you convince these two to hang around you, Deku? They're probably losers too. It'd be a shame if someone punished them for hanging around such a useless freak. Okada cracked his knuckles, showing the true meaning behind his words. The boys that were with Bakugo when Izuku pinned him to the ground and threatened them all stopped hanging out with the blonde soon after, so these goons didn't understand the threat that he could be. He took their threats to his safety in stride, day after day, allowing them to call him useless and tell him it'd be better if he just disappeared. But for them to threaten his friends, his family? He would make them regret stepping foot into this cafe. His chair scraped the floor as he slowly pushed it out, staring ahead at the group in front of him. The muscles throughout his body were stiff with tension, coiled like a spring ready to pounce at any moment. Izuku, they aren't worth it. Hitoshi clutched his arm, knowing his friend would feel horrible if he hurt any of the assholes in front of them. They clearly want to fight, Toshi. It'd only be fair for me to give it to them. He met Bakugo's eyes, his chest filling with glee when the blonde actually took a step back in fear. Remember what I said last time, Bakugo? He thought to himself. Like you could give us a fight, useless fucking Deku. Okada stepped forward, sneering at Izuku. Izuku, please, you should not lower yourself to their level. Tenya grabbed his other arm. Izuku tried to listen to his friends, but the anger inside him was a burning inferno. No one threatened the people he cared about. Is there a problem here? Mr. Kobayashi's voice called from where he had just emerged from the kitchen. The group of bullies turned to the cafe owner. Yeah, I didn't realize you served quirkless here. Tsubasa sneered at the man's question. Izuku's heart plummeted as wondered how this would go. Would Mr. Kobayashi throw him out so he wouldn't lose customers? To his immense surprise and relief, Mr. Kobayashi's face morphed into a scowl at the boy's implication. Everyone is welcome here, except those that want to cause problems with other customers. I suggest you boys find somewhere else to get an after-school treat. The man's towering form straightened, showing he was not going to back down. The group rolled their eyes and made disgruntled comments as they left, shooting Izuku and his friends one last glare before exiting the cafe. Bakugo was the only straddler, looking conflicted as he left. Are those the type of people you hang out with now, Katsuki? I'm very disappointed. Mr. Kobayashi looked at the boy, the one he had watched grow up over the years, with pain in his eyes. I hope you learn sooner than later what type of person you really want to be, for your sake. The explosive boy stared at the man for a few moments before sucking his teeth and leaving. The tension slowly left Izuku's body, but he and his friends sat in silence as they all processed the interaction that had just occurred. He knew they would once again ask him why he didn't just leave Aldera, and he would have to argue his point yet again. Mr. Kobayashi placed a plate of assorted mochi in front of them, letting them know it was on the house. As the three boys dug into their treat, Izuku felt overwhelmed with emotional exhaustion. "Are we sure this is a good idea?" Hisashi asked as they stood in front of the Midoriya household to pick their nephew up. The blonde shifted with anxiety, looking as though he regretted their decision more and more at every passing moment. "We're doing what's best for Izuku." After Hitoshi had returned home and recounted the incident at the cafe, both heroes could no longer justify standing by while Izuku suffered. They had called an emergency meeting with all the adults in the boy's life, and they had come to an agreement. Izuku would never forgive them if they forced him to leave his school, but they could give him a push in the right direction. Sadly, that direction involved introducing the green-haired child to the rat god. Netsu had been asking about their nephew for years now, wanting to meet the child that had stolen the hearts of so many heroes. News of the kid's analysis had spread, and the principal constantly requested copies of Izuku's journals. Shota and Hisashi had agreed to hold off the inevitable meeting until their nephew was at UA, but drastic times called for drastic measures. So here they were, ready to introduce two geniuses and potentially bring about the end of the world as they knew it. Well, it was worth it if Izuku was happy. At least, that's what Shota told himself as he knocked on the door. Dabi answered a few moments later, wearing Shota's old cat-eared hoodie and present Mike sweatpants. The outfit warmed his heart, and his husband's if his teary-eyed expression was anything to go by. They were so grateful that their nephews looked up to them as heroes, and were always working to be worthy of that admiration. "Sup?" Dabi took a sip of his coffee before gesturing for the pair to enter the home. The little menaces are in Zuku's room, Mom is in the kitchen with Isamu, Kigo and Rumi are in the backyard. Their eldest nephew proceeded to carefully place his empty mug on the coffee table before throwing himself face-first into the couch cushions. It seemed the teen wanted to fully enjoy his day off from training, not that Shota could blame him. Hitoshi was already here, having spent the night with Izuku and Tenya so they could help the freckled boy organize his notebooks. The rest of the family seemed to live in the Midoriya home more than their actual houses, and could often be seen wandering around or causing chaos. "Oh, hello. I didn't realize you two were here already, we must have lost track of time." Inko had just emerged from the kitchen, closely followed by Snipe. Shota was still getting used to seeing his colleague out of costume, but he was a nice addition to the family. Isamu's dark blue dreads were pulled into a bun on the top of his head, and the man wore an oversized red sweatshirt with matching sweatpants. It almost looked like he had stayed the night, but Shota would store that information for later. Inko deserved to have a life outside of raising her children and fighting corruption, and he wouldn't judge her for who she chose to live it with. "No worries. Dabi let us in, we wanted to get here a little early so we could say hi to everyone." Hisashi moved in for a hug, using his height to squeeze Inko tightly. Mama Midoriya's hugs were truly the best thing on earth, and everyone in the family took advantage of them when they could. "I'll grab you two some coffee while we wait for the boys to come down," Snipe offered, walking back into the kitchen while Inko smiled at his back. "Boys, your uncles are here." Inko called up the stairs as Hisashi and Shota settled into the love seats next to the couch Dabi was currently passed out on. A few moments later, 3 pairs of footsteps could be heard descending the stairs. Hitoshi and Tenya appeared first, greeting the men normally before settling into their own seats. Izuku, the gremlin that he was, had to make a dramatic entrance. He began running as soon as he came into view, leaping over the couch and crashing onto his older brother with a beaming smile on his face. Dabi let out a pained groan as the green-haired boy settled into his back, nuzzling into the fluffy fabric of his hoodie. The older boy opened his mouth to argue but sighed in defeat a few moments later. "Why can't you ever just ask to cuddle like a normal little brother?" Dabi reached back and ruffled his hair affectionately while the rest of the group giggled at the display in front of them. Izuku gave him a cheeky smile, rolling off of the couch and onto the floor in a smooth motion. The kid's movements sometimes reminded Shota of an agile cat, and the thought always brought a smile to his face. "It's more fun when I can terrorize you a bit," and it helps with your training. Izuku dodged Dabi's attempt to tickle him before settling in on the floor in front of Hizashi's seat. Who are we terrorizing? Rumi's voice called from the back of the house as she and Kigo made their way into the living room. Dabi doesn't like the way I ask for cuddles. Izuku gave an over-exaggerated pout and crossed his arms. Shota rolled his eyes affectionately, amazed at how adorable and manipulative the boy could be. Really? Well, that won't do. Kigo's eyes sparkled with mischief. Dabi could barely brace himself before the two heroes leaped over the back of the couch and flattened him beneath them. Kigo ended up sandwiched in between Rumi and Dabi, and a bright blush had overtaken his face. I feel like Tenya and I are the only mature ones here, besides the real adults. Hitoshi said in a deadpan voice. I would agree, Toshi. Inko's voice piped up from the kitchen, where she and Isamu were emerging with trays of coffee and tea for the group. Shota gratefully took a mug of steaming hot coffee, chugging it almost in one go. They still had 30 minutes until they had to leave, and he was prepared to fill his body with caffeine before he had to interact with Nezu. How are you feeling about your meeting, Izuku? Inko asked from her place next to Isamu, sipping on her own mug of tea. The boy pursed his lips and scrunched his eyebrows, a sign that he was thinking out his answer before replying. It was frankly adorable, not that Shota would ever admit that out loud. He hoped his nephew would keep some of his innocence after working with the rat. The boy definitely shared some of the rougher traits of Rumi and Shota, but he was still sunshine incarnate. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm still a bit nervous. I know you guys always compliment my analysis, but this is Nezu we're talking about here. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, a habit that only re-emerged when he was extremely nervous. A pang of guilt hit Shota in his chest at the sight of his nephew doubting himself. He was so concerned with introducing the kid to Nezu that he didn't think about how the meeting was affecting the boy. Before he could speak up, Isamu stepped in. Kiddo, you're one of the smartest people I've met in my life. Including adults. Nezu is going to be impressed with your mind, just like we all are. Inko smiled warmly at the man, and everyone relaxed a bit as the tension drained out of Izuku. Shota was hesitant to let Snipe into their little circle, but the hero proved over and over again that he deserved to be in the Midoriya's lives. He sometimes wondered if Izuku realized just how many people would burn the world down for him. Thanks, guys, I really appreciate your support. Izuku smiled as Hizashi ruffled his hair. They spent the rest of the time discussing training and the upcoming family movie night until it was time to leave. Hitoshi and Tenya would stay at the Midoriya household so they could be there when Izuku returned, ready to hear a thorough play-by-play of the meeting. Kigo and Rumi had a shared day off, so they would hang around to terrorize Dabi and ready themselves to support their little brother. Hizashi hopped into the driver's seat of their car while Shota settled in up front, giving Izuku a soft smile in the rearview mirror. The boy had made Shota soft, but only for his family. If only his students could see him now, smiling and singing along to Hizashi's terrible American pop playlist. He'd have to make sure to seem extra grumpy next time he was in front of his class, just to even out the energy. He spared one more glance at his nephew in the back seat, smiling brightly and singing at the top of his lungs. The kid would be okay, they would make sure of it. Nakaguro Nakaguro. Izuku stared up at the gates of UA, which were now a familiar sight for the boy. He occasionally came here for training, or to meet one of his uncles after their classes let out for the day. Now, he was here to meet one of his idols and the smartest being on the planet. No biggie. Tenya and Hitoshi had stayed up late with him, combing through his journals and notes so that he had a presentable portfolio for the principal to review. His family assured him that Nezu would be happy to mentor him, but he wanted to put his best foot forward. He wasn't entirely sure what this meeting would entail, but he was prepared for anything at this point. Nezu was famous for being chaotic and unpredictable. Ready to go, little listener? Uncle Zashi came up behind him and placed a hand on his shoulder, which helped him to relax a little bit. He reminded himself that his uncles would be there every step of the way, so he nodded and followed them onto school grounds. Izuku had seen most of the campus at this point but had been purposefully steered away from the principal's office and most of the main building. He knew his uncles were just being protective, but he was curious as to why he had been kept away from Nezu for so long. As they made their way through the maze-like building, he went through everything he knew about the mysterious head of UA. Nedzu had been experimented on by a group of cruel scientists, a background that would have given him every right to hate humanity. Instead, he used his intelligence to help pave the way for the next generation of heroes. He was known for enjoying a bit of chaos and messing with his staff, but overall leaned more towards chaotic good than evil. As they walked down the hallways, Izuku noticed a few hidden cameras eyeing them discreetly. He chose to wave at them, wondering if there was a security guard on the other end that watched the students day by day. On the other end of the feed, Nedzu sat grinning into his tea, already intrigued by the boy that noticed cameras no one else seemed to find. They finally made it to their destination, and Izuku waved to the last camera he saw. He hoped the security guard felt acknowledged for all their hard work, keeping the students of UA safe every day. His uncles stared at him with wide eyes as the door opened, a cheerful voice greeting them as they stepped into the large room. "Hello. You must be Midoriya Izuku. I have heard so much about you." The principal was much shorter than Izuku was originally expecting, but he hid his shock and greeted the man politely. "It is nice to meet you, sir. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me and look over my notes." Izuku bowed slightly, unsure of how formal his greeting should be. "None of that. We're all friends here, Midoriya. Come and sit, would you like some tea?" The principal gestured for the seats in front of him, and when Izuku accepted the offer of tea, a pot seemed to appear out of nowhere. He settled in, sat in between his two uncles, and began taking out the notebooks he chose for the occasion. He placed them on the desk in front of him before picking up his mug, using the heat to ground himself. He wasn't as nervous as he thought he would be, but this was still a big moment for him. His family always complimented his analysis, but validation from the Nedzu would be the final push he needed to truly believe them. "I'm so happy your uncles finally agreed to let us meet. I've been looking forward to reading your analysis for quite some time. Let's take a look, shall we?" Nedzu's grin widened a fraction before he grabbed the journal on top of the stack. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes as he worked his way through the pile of notebooks, his smile growing as his tail wagged faster and faster. Once he was finished with the final journal, he gave a content sigh and took a sip of tea. "Well then, you surely did not disappoint." Nedzu clapped his hands together as he shot a pleased smile towards the boy in front of him. Izuku took in a deep breath for the first time since they entered the room, preening under the positive attention. Uncle Zashi reached out and squeezed his wrist in support. "Thank you, sir. That really means a lot coming from you." Izuku smiled shyly before asking his next question. "Do you think I could be a hero, even if I'm quirkless?" Nedzu responded almost immediately. "Of course. Especially with a mind like yours. UA would be honored to help train the first quirkless hero." He was shocked by how quickly the principal responded, although he had learned to expect this answer from the heroes in his life. He fought to control the tears forming in his eyes, and steeled himself for his last question. "I'm really happy to hear you say that. I was wondering, if you had any extra time, would you be willing to help me hone my analysis and strategy skills? I also want to create a code for my notes so they can't be used against any of the heroes. I think analysis will be my ticket to becoming the best hero I can be." Nedzu's smile grew impossibly wider, and Izuku thought he saw Uncle Sho shiver out of the corner of his eye. He must be seeing things due to his nerves. "I am certainly interested in mentoring such a talented mind, Midoriya. I would like to go through a few tests to see where your skills are at, but first I have a question." Izuku wondered what the principal could ask, hoping this wasn't the moment that would make or break their tentative relationship. "Of course, sir. Ask away." Izuku's hands were sweating as he went over possible questions in his head. "What hybrid am I?" Nedzu asked, voice laced with curiosity and a hint of smugness. Izuku furrowed his eyebrows, confused by the simple question. Surely anyone could see what the man was, but from the looks on his uncle's faces that did not seem to be the case. A sudden surge of confidence filled his chest, knowing that he might actually be intelligent enough to not waste Nedzu's time. With a shit-eating grin that most certainly did not belong on a 12-year-old's face, he confidently replied, "A stoat, sir," casually taking a sip of tea for full dramatic effect. "You're the first person to guess correctly, Midoriya." I think we're going to get along very well. Nezu and Izuku sat smiling at each other for a few moments, while Hisashi and Shota grew increasingly more uncomfortable. Abort mission. Izuku heard Uncle Sho whisper, causing Nezu to break out into a maniacal cackle. Once the principal had calmed down, he poured himself another cup of tea and took out a box from his desk. He removed a chess set from it, and Izuku felt a sudden pang of anxiety. While chess always seemed like something he would enjoy, he had never gotten around to playing. Tenya had once shown interest in learning, but neither boy ever went through with it. Perhaps if Nezu was willing to teach him, he could pass the skills on to Tenya and Hitoshi. Have you ever played chess, Midoriya? Nezu's smile was patient, immediately draining all the nerves from Izuku's body. No, but I've always wanted to learn. Izuku eyed the pieces curiously, his mind already craving the knowledge of what each piece did. The principal explained the basics and demonstrated a few strategies for the boy, who absorbed the information like a sponge. Shota and Hisashi watched on in interest, curious to see how their nephew performed against the genius in front of him. They knew their nephew was extremely intelligent, but Nezu would not go easy on him just because of his age. Over the next hour or so, Nezu and Izuku played multiple rounds of chess, and the boy's skill only grew over time. The length of the matches increased, as did the principal's focus, but Izuku was too into his own head to notice the challenge he was giving the stoat. After one last tense match where Izuku almost secured a win, Nezu put the board away to discuss his thoughts. You learn quite quickly, Midoriya. No one has ever gotten that close to beating me before. I actually had to think over my moves a few times. How exciting! Nezu's tail was wagging quickly, and Izuku couldn't help but smile at the praise. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate you teaching me how to play. I enjoyed our matches. Izuku thought he had proven himself, but he didn't want to get too cocky. Enough of this, sir, nonsense. Please just call me Nezu. Now, I understand your mother wanted to meet with me before your lessons start? Aizawa, please pass along my information so that I can schedule a meeting with Ms. Midoriya. Nezu finished his tea before heading over to one of the bookshelves lining the walls of the office. He returned with a few books in his hands, placing them on the table in front of Izuku. For now, I'd like you to read through these books and take notes on what you learn. After your mother and I figure out a schedule that works, we will discuss the contents. Aizawa and Yamada can provide you with my contact information. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me, even if you'd just like to chat a bit. Nezu smiled warmly at the boy, or as warmly as an animal with sharp fangs could smile. Thank you, Nezu. I won't let you down. Izuku's eyes sparkled as he looked over the spines of the books. The specializations included hacking, psychology, quirk theory, English language, and a variety of other topics that Izuku couldn't wait to learn about. The trio said their goodbyes and walked in comfortable silence until they reached the staff parking lot. His uncles had carried his collection of textbooks outside so that he could carry his backpack stuffed with notebooks, and once Mike had set his stack on the back seat, he pulled Izuku in for a tight hug. I am so proud of you. The last part of the sentence was quirk-enhanced, but not enough to cause any discomfort. It was Zashi's way of showing him that he was proud, and Izuku smiled as he squeezed his uncle. Sho ruffled his hair, his own proud grin hiding underneath his capture weapon. You did good, kiddo. Now promise me you won't try to take over the world until you're at least 18. Shota chuckled, but he was only half joking. No promises, Uncle Sho. Izuku giggled when his uncle gave him an unamused glare, quickly sliding into the back seat to escape any retaliatory tickles. Oh no, there goes my sweet little nephew. Now we're left with this sassy little gremlin. Hisashi sighed dramatically as he buckled his seatbelt. We watch him terrorize Dabi and Kigo on a daily basis. I think he has always been a little chaotic. Uncle Sho quipped from the passenger seat. Izuku made sure to stick his tongue out into the rearview mirror, giggling when his grumpy uncle threw him a glare. Zashi's eyes widened suddenly, as though a thought just occurred to him. Izuku merely cackled once he heard what was on his uncle's mind. I just realized his pranks are going to be so much worse now. Nakaguro. Izuku's victims. Baby chaos. Does anyone want to play chess with me? Smiley face. Bro. No. Chicken nugget. No thanks, baby bird. Carrot lover. I learned my lesson the first time, Izu. Carrot lover. By the way, whoever changed my name is dead. Smiley face. Yeehaw, no violence allowed unless supervised by an adult. Rumi, Kigo, Dabi, and Tensei do not count as adults. Yeehaw. Also, I might not be much of a challenge, but I can try to play with you after patrol. Sharpshooter. Mini sleepy. Sorry, Zuku. I can only lose so many times before it becomes embarrassing. Uncle happy face agreed. It's like playing with another version of Nedzu, which is frankly terrifying. Zoom Jr. Izuku, I would be happy to play with you when Tensei and I return from our family trip up north. It will be a truly educational experience. Zoom, I will happily watch you destroy everyone at chess, kiddo. Mama Midoriya, Izuku, I thought we were going to play together when I got home? Baby Chaos, you keep winning, I want to win. Sad face. Chicken Nugget. Sometimes I forget how terrifying you two are. Chaos. Inko has proven to be quite the opponent during our weekly meetings over tea. Smiley face. Uncle Sleepy. What have I done? Izuku focused on his breathing as he finished the last mile of his morning run, a ritual that he had taken up shortly after he began training with Rumi. Dabi sometimes joined him depending on his training schedule, but Izuku was by himself today. He took in the sounds of his neighborhood, smiling at the old ladies he passed on the sidewalk and watching shopkeepers setting up for the day. These moments he got to himself, alone with his thoughts, were his favorite part of the day. It was the quiet before the storm, a chance to ground himself before he had to go to school and deal with torment from his peers. He cleared his mind for the last few minutes of his workout, allowing his muscle memory to take over as he finally approached his street. As he opened the gate, he noticed the dining room light was on, meaning his mother and brother were up for breakfast. A small smile formed on his face, excited to spend a bit of time with his family before he went to school. A dark blue truck pulled into their driveway as he was approaching the door, and he greeted Isamu once the man had exited the vehicle. The cowboy had become a staple at their breakfast table, and Izuku couldn't help but wonder when he and his mother would officially begin dating. There had been enough nights where the man accidentally fell asleep on their couch, or became a stuttering mess around the Midoriya matriarch, that a betting pool had formed in their family. While Izuku would very much like to win the pool of money, he was honestly just happy for his mother. She had done so much for him and the rest of the family, and she deserved so much more than his father had ever given her. A man that would abandon his wife and child was not worthy of Inko Midoriya. Mom, I'm home and Isamu is here. The delicious smell of cooked fish permeated the air, and his mother made her way out of the kitchen to greet them. Dabi waved from where he was nursing a coffee by the counter, turning back to the rice he was dishing out into bowls. Izuku, why don't you go take a shower and join us when you're done? His mother smiled at him before guiding Isamu to the kitchen. An unspoken rule in the Midoriya household was if you were eating a meal, you would help in some way. Izuku mentally thanked his mother for sparing him from the chore as he made his way up to his room to shower and change. Once he was freshened up, he joined his family at the table, scarfing down the simple meal as he talked to Dabi about the new video game they were planning on playing together. I'm going to the mall with Zashi after school today. I can pick it up for us then if you want. Izuku offered as he got up to wash and dry his dish. Sounds good, Squirt. Then we can play this weekend when Tenya and Toshi come over. Dabi lightly pushed him with his hip, forcing him to scoot further down the counter so that he could wash his plate. Hey sharpshooter, do you need a ride to school? Isamu asked as he entered the kitchen, carrying both his and Inko's plates to wash. This was another addition to his daily routine, getting rides from the blue-haired man every once in a while. Izuku had grown fond of the Western music playing softly in the background as they chatted on the way to school. Normally he would take him up on the offer, but today he had a bit of energy to dispel before he began his day. Thanks Isamu, but I'll pass today. I want to walk off some of the leftover energy from my run. The hero simply nodded, ruffling Izuku's hair before joining Inko in the dining room to chat over their coffee. It amazed Izuku how quickly this man had formed a place at their table and in their hearts. He finished putting on his uniform and grabbing what he needed for the day, kissed his mother goodbye, and headed out for school. Dread filled his stomach as he thought about what he would face throughout the day, but he steeled himself and kept walking. Were Toshi and Tenya right? Should he just give up and go to Sumai or attend homeschool? Wouldn't that make him weak? He was so lost in his own thoughts he didn't pay attention to where he was going, and before he knew it he was pummeling into another body in front of him. His hand reached out instinctually, grabbing the person before they fell to the ground. When he looked up to apologize, he was met with burning red eyes boring into him. Of course Bakugo would be the person he almost knocked over. "Sorry," Izuku said flatly, not really meaning his apology. The blonde glared at him, rubbing his shoulder but straightening himself up when Izuku glanced at it. The other boy seemed like he had a question on the tip of his tongue, but he shook his head and scoffed instead. "Watch where you're going, loser." With that, Bakugo turned and kept walking. Izuku rolled his eyes, annoyed that this was the way his day had started off. "I hope he changes his ways before we get into high school. No one needs a hero with an attitude like that." He made sure to stay far away from the blonde as he walked the rest of the way to school, taking a deep breath before he entered the building. His senses were on overdrive, constantly searching for anyone waiting to attack or harass him. The years of training with his family really helped him in this regard. Once he made it to his classroom, he sighed in relief, grateful that no one had messed with him before he could get to his desk. He should have known better than to let his guard down. His book bag was yanked from his back, and he watched in silent horror as it was dumped out into the hallway. The Hawk's pencil pouch that Kigo got him for his birthday spilled open, and his pencils slowly rolled away. He stood there, completely frozen as other students began kicking his notebooks further down the hallway. The taunts and insults thrown his way weren't reaching him. The only sound he heard was the blood pumping in his ears. A deep rage filled his gut, pooling there before it permeated throughout his body, threatening to overtake him. There were no thoughts in his mind outside of getting revenge for the treatment he was forced to endure. Before he could move and do something he would inevitably regret, a familiar blonde bent down to pick up his book bag. The action shook Izuku out of his anger-fueled daze, and he watched as Bakugo stood with the bag and waved it around. "Of course, a useless loser like you can't even wear a bag correctly," Bakugo taunted, shoving Izuku's bag into his chest before walking to his desk. It was only when Izuku went to pick up his belongings that he noticed a few of his pencils and books had been stuffed haphazardly back into it. He decided to ignore whatever it was his ex-childhood friend was trying to accomplish, gathering the rest of his things and sitting at his desk. If Bakugo wanted to atone for his actions, he'd have to do much more than that. To distract himself from the verbal harassment from his teachers and peers, he thought about the plans he had after school. He and Mike had created somewhat of a tradition, shopping together at the mall every few months and then getting dinner and ice cream. He loved spending one-on-one time with his uncle, especially now that their family kept growing over the years. While he might not be as passionate about shopping as the blonde man, he still appreciated the pieces his uncle had collected for him over the years. His well-worn leather jacket had become a staple in his wardrobe, especially after Dabi and Rumi bought him different pins to add to it. His strategy to distract himself worked as the bell for lunch rang much earlier than he expected. He carefully gathered his things and walked in the opposite direction of the cafeteria. Early in the school year, he realized that eating in the lunchroom would only result in his food being messed with, so he quickly found a secluded place to enjoy his meals. He huddled into his hiding space beneath one of the stairwells, unfolding the blanket he had left there a few weeks ago so that his uniform wouldn't get dusty. The bento his mother made him smelled delicious, and he grinned at the note she had left him that morning. "Don't forget how much we all love you, Izuku." Smiley face. Izuku thought about the family he had created over the years, and how much support he really had behind him. He could never let them know how bad it really was at school. It would only prove that he wasn't worth the effort they had all put into him and his training. His thoughts were interrupted when his phone buzzed, and he pulled it out of his pocket as he took the first few bites of his food. Hitoshi and Tenya had made a habit of texting him during their lunch hour, chatting about their days and checking in on Izuku. Problem children. Sonic. Hello, Izuku. How has your day been so far? Panda. Happy face. Let us know if we need to help you hide a body. Gremlin. For a family full of heroes, we sure do default to talking about homicide a lot. Gremlin. And today has been okay, just the usual. He debated telling them about his bag being dumped out, or the strange incident with Bakugo that followed, but thought better of it. They didn't need to be burdened with his issues, especially when there wasn't anything they could do about it. They texted for a while, talking about plans for the weekend and any cool hero fights they had seen recently. Tenya and Hitoshi sent him a selfie of the two of them eating together, smiling brightly for the camera. A pang of sadness filled Izuku's heart, and for a moment he imagined himself at the table with them. Before the lunch period was over, Izuku pulled up his conversation with Rumi. He loved all of his family members equally, but she was the first person to actually believe in him besides his mother. They had a different relationship than he had with Kigo or even Dabi, as she had been with him since the beginning. Little Bunny, hey sis, just wanted to see how your day was going. Big Bunny, it's a boring day, but hopefully I'll be able to kick some ass at some point. Hope you're having a good day at school, Izuku. Smiley face. He knew she was on patrol, so he wouldn't bother her with his conflicted emotions. Just texting her made him feel a bit better, reminding him that he had people in his corner looking out for him. As he walked back to class, he checked his phone one last time, seeing that he missed a text from his uncle. Presentation Michael, hey kiddo, want me to pick you up from school today? His family was constantly trying to pick him up for school, insisting that they wait by the front gate or even come to visit his class and pick him up early. He knew it was their way of trying to intimidate his classmates and highlight his relationship to the heroes, but he wanted to earn that respect on his own. When he became a hero, he would not be able to depend on them when people tried to mess with him, so he should learn how to handle it on his own now. He also didn't want to seem like a charity case, and he knew his classmates would try to pretend to be his friend if they knew he had such close connections to top heroes. It was better for them to never know, at least until he was a hero in his own right. He told his uncle to meet him at a cafe a few blocks away, hoping the man would respect his wishes. The one time Kigo had shown up to the school had caused a riot, and Izuku had snuck out the back gate before the hero could cause even more of a scene. The rest of his day went by normally, jumping over feet meant to trip him and ignoring the taunts of his classmates. When the final bell rang, he used his stealth training to get out of the building without incident. If his uncle saw any injuries, he'd freak out, possibly getting his mother involved. Luckily, none of his classmates were in the cafe, and he found his uncle sitting at one of the tables with 2 drinks in front of him. Hey little listener, I got you some hot chocolate. If you want something to eat, just let me know. His uncle smiled warmly at him, and all of the stress and tension from the day melted out of Izuku's body. Thanks, Uncle Zashi. I'm actually going to change real quick if that's okay. His uncle nodded, pointing to the restrooms and going to the counter to order Izuku a snack. Once the boy was in his casual clothes, he sat at the table and took a few appreciative sips of his drink. They relaxed there for a bit, catching up and enjoying their treats before heading to the crowded mall. Do you need anything specific, or would you just like to shop around? Mike asked, eyes roaming the shops in front of them. Izuku thought for a moment before shrugging. Let's just see where the day takes us. They decided to go to a hero store first, trying to find any merchandise that caught their eye. Izuku's room used to be an all-might shrine, but his idolization of heroes had been tamed over the years. He viewed heroes as humans just like everyone else. His room now had his family's merchandise in it, and he always felt surrounded by love whenever he was at home. He ended up scoring an official Eraserhead poster, a rare find for the underground hero. Izuku ended up buying one for Hitoshi and Dabi as well, knowing his fellow Eraserhead fans would enjoy the gift. An Ingenium keychain and a Nedzu stuffed animal also joined his collection, and Mike laughed a bit when he saw the toy. It is interesting to see how he is with you. He's so terrifying most of the time, but you've managed to soften him up a bit. The man ruffled Izuku's hair affectionately. Izuku blushed, not knowing how to react to the comment. It's not a big deal, he's just doing you and Uncle Sho a favor by teaching me. His uncle stared at him for a long moment, and Izuku shifted underneath the man's gaze. You know that isn't true, right? He wouldn't have taken you as a personal student if you didn't earn it. The joking demeanor Mike usually spoke with was gone, replaced by a serious tone. Izuku nodded, not fully believing him but unwilling to argue. He knew he needed to work on his confidence, but he had a long road ahead of him if he wanted to make any progress. Maybe Aunt Namuri would be willing to help me more? With a weighty conversation behind them, they explored a few more stores, with Izuku picking up new books while his uncle bought a set of records for his music collection. After another hour of shopping, they decided to make their way to the food court for a greasy dinner. It was always a nice treat to deviate from their hero diets every once in a while. I already know what you're going to get, so why don't we meet by the ice cream place when we both have our food? His uncle offered, and Izuku couldn't help but smile at how well the man knew him. They parted ways, Izuku on his way to the counter that sold his favorite katsudon and Mike to get some type of American fast food. Izuku had just gotten into line when the building began to shake. Screams broke out from one of the nearby clothing stores, and shoppers began pouring out as smoke began flowing through the air. Izuku immediately switched into crisis mode, searching the crowd for his uncle. They locked eyes across the cafeteria, and Mike nodded to him before they both sprung into action and ran towards the commotion. Izuku, call the police and then help evacuate people. If you have time, send an alert to the family group chat in case any of them are nearby to help. I'm going to see what is going on. His uncle was now in hero mode, quickly taking control of the situation. Izuku found an area away from the stampeding crowd to call the police to alert them of the situation, and once he confirmed they were alerting local heroes, he made his way back towards the store. He was grateful that he brought a few of the gadgets he and Nedzu had been working on to school, and he pulled a few items out of his bag before jumping into action. Attention! He yelled, pulling the trigger on the device in his hand. A red light flashed out of the metal cylinder and his voice was projected over the noise of the scared shoppers. Please use the nearest emergency exit to evacuate safely and calmly. Heroes are on their way. He helped guide people towards the exit, reuniting lost children with their parents and helping older shoppers out of the building. Adrenaline was pumping through his veins, and he focused on his task even as the sounds of fighting grew closer. He was guiding an old woman towards the exit when a piece of metal was flung towards them. In seconds he had moved them away from the object's main trajectory, but it still wasn't enough to avoid some impact. He covered the woman with his body, hoping to take on most of the damage. At the last second something wrapped around the projectile, launching it away from Izuku and the woman. Nice instincts, kid. A voice called from a few feet away. When Izuku looked to see who had rescued him, his jaw dropped in shock. Oh my god, Best Genius just saved me. Standing in all of his denim-clad glory, the fiber hero approached the pair to look them over for injuries. After he confirmed Izuku and the old woman were unharmed, he gestured for one of his sidekicks to come over to them. Help her get to the exit safely, try to avoid fighting as much as possible. The man instructed, watching as the other hero wrapped his arms around the woman. Before they left she stopped and turned to Izuku. You were very heroic, young man. I can't wait to see you go pro. She smiled warmly at him, and Izuku felt immense pride as he watched her walk safely out of the building. Now, where are you, guardians? The man turned to him, eyeing him expectantly. It must have been a strange sight, seeing a kid doing crowd control during a villain fight. I was with my uncle, present Mike, sir. He instructed me to guide people out of the building and to alert the authorities. Izuku tried to stand tall as he spoke, but the hero still towered over him. My name is Izuku Midoriya. You can confirm with him if you'd like. The man stared at him for a long moment, clearly trying to figure out why a pro hero would trust a child with such an important task. He must have seen something in Izuku's eyes, because after a while he simply nodded. Okay, continue what you were doing and stay out of trouble. I'll be having a conversation with your uncle about civilian safety once this is over. The hero jumped back into action, taking down two of the villains with ease. Izuku refocused himself, guiding the remaining civilians out of the building while doing his best to avoid fighting. As he was guiding the last civilian out, a dozen red feathers blocked a piece of concrete from hitting him. I thought we worked on your situational awareness, little bro. Kigo landed in front of him, smiling at the startled civilian and winking at Izuku. Kigo, I didn't know you were here. Izuku smiled up at the hero, who gestured for Izuku to continue what he was doing. Don't mind me, you're doing a great job, Izuku. They finished walking the woman outside, and they were both glad to see the villains being rounded up by various heroes in the food court. You stay here, I'm going to go see if they need any help. Kigo flew off before Izuku could respond, and he awkwardly watched the assembled heroes cuff the villains as they waited for police vans to arrive. Once the robbers were secured, Kigo had to go back to his patrol route, but Mike quickly found Izuku and checked him over for any cuts and bruises. "Inko is going to kill me." Hisashi rubbed a hand down his face, looking genuinely distressed at the idea of facing Izuku's mother. "It won't be that bad. It's not like I was fighting villains or anything." Izuku tried to comfort his uncle, but he barely convinced himself with that statement. Yes, present mate. I think we should discuss your decision to have a miner facilitate crowd control during an active villain attack." Izuku and Mike both turned, now facing the towering figure of Best Jeanist. The man looked bored, but his eyes shined with a deep intelligence that had Izuku on edge. Mike immediately stiffened, glaring at the man in front of them. Izuku wasn't aware of any beef between the two, but the charged air indicated that there was more going on here than he might realize. "Hello, Jeanist." His uncle spat, using a tone that Izuku had never heard from the man. This miner has specialized training from multiple pro heroes and was an asset during the initial response to the incident. Izuku knew from the formal language the man was using that he was angry, an emotion he was shocked to see. Hisashi didn't do anger, it was all jokes and good vibes. What exactly was going on between him and the number 4 hero to elicit such a reaction? Jeanist simply huffed in response to his uncle's statement before turning in Izuku's direction. He expected to be reprimanded by the hero, or threatened with a vigilantism charge. "Good job, kid." Izuku and Mick's jaws dropped in unison at the compliment. "I am sorry you had to be involved, but you kept a cool head and got everyone out safely." Jeanist reached his hand out, looking to shake Izuku's hand. The boy lifted his hand slowly, still processing the turn of events. He didn't expect to be praised by the hero who was chastising his uncle only moments ago. After a few moments he was finally stable enough to respond. "Thank you, sir. I only did what my uncle and the rest of the family have been teaching me." Izuku gestured towards Mike, who was carefully watching the interaction. The denim hero eyed Mike suspiciously, before turning to Izuku. He stared at him for a few long moments before nodding, like he had come to some type of decision. "Well, I would like to see you continue to grow." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek case and reaching for a business card. "Here is my contact information. I'd like to see what you can do and potentially take you on as a mentee." Izuku took the card, his hands shaking from nerves and excitement. "I think you'd benefit from learning from someone with less tacky taste." The word was pointed towards Mike, and Izuku grew a bit defensive. "My uncle is a really great mentor. He's taught me a lot over the years. I'll take you up on the offer, but please don't speak to him that way." Izuku stood up straight, staring the man down even though he was filled with nerves. The small smile on Zashi's face made it all worth it, though. Jeanist raised his eyebrows in surprise, clearly not expecting that type of response. He glanced between the Izuku and Mike a few times, before his face broke out into the first smile Izuku had seen from the man. "You have guts, kid." He gave Izuku an appreciative nod. "I'll be sure to show your uncle a bit more respect in the future. He has clearly taught you some valuable skills." Izuku looked up at the man, contemplating his next question. "I do have one more thing to ask you, sir." The hero gestured for him to continue, so Izuku clenched his fists and asked the question that would make or break this agreement. "Do you think quirkless people can be heroes?" He watched for any changes in the man's expression, looking for any signs of disgust or hatred. Izuku was surprised to see a bemused smile form on the man's face. "I think they can do anything with enough motivation and the right people in their corner." He ruffled Izuku's curls before walking away. Izuku smiled, happy that another hero believed he could achieve his goals. With that settled, the hero returned to his sidekicks, and Izuku and Mike found their shopping bags and headed to a nearby restaurant for a late dinner. Inko was more proud of Izuku than angry, but Hisashi was still sweating as he sat on the couch to explain what happened. Kigo and Rumi were both surprised that Jeanist had offered to mentor Izuku, explaining that the man was hard to impress. Izuku sent a text to the hero before he went to sleep, explaining that his mother would need to meet with him before they did any training together. He couldn't believe he would be training with yet another top 10 hero, or that he had been doubting himself just a few hours before the incident at the mall. I can do this, he thought to himself before falling asleep, feeling more content than he had at the start of his day. Nakaguro. Inko Midoriya Fan Club. Emo bro, hey. I have some cool news to share with you all. Can everyone come over to our house for dinner tomorrow? Uncle will be there. Chicken Nugget, I come over for dinner anyways so I'll be there. Angry Bunny, Happy Face Carrot same. Uncle Sleepy. Inko, would you like us to bring anything? Mama Midoriya, no, I have everything covered. Smiley Face. Yeehaw, I can come over early to help. Mama Midoriya, sure. Thank you, Isamu, Smiley Face. Zoom, Tenya and I will be there. Excited to see what your news is. Rat God, thank you for the invitation, I will be there. I have a new tea blend I think you all will enjoy. Smiley Face. Denim Man, I am not sure if I am invited, but I'd be happy to attend if so. Emo bro, you're a part of the family now, no take-backs. Mini Sleepy, once Izuku adopts you there is no escape. Yeehaw, you all make the little sharpshooter sound so scary. Chicken Nugget, he is. Angry Rabbit, he is. Emo bro, he is. Zoom Jr., he is. Mini Sleepy, he is. Green Gremlin, really guys? Sad Face. Dabi stood in his room, checking himself over for the 100th time as he stared in the mirror. He shouldn't be this nervous to talk to his family, but the news he had to share was life-changing. His hand dived into his pocket, checking to make sure his freshly laminated provisional hero license was still there. Knock knock. He turned towards the door, already knowing who was on the other side. Komen uncle sho. He called out, nervously adjusting the sleeves of his black dress shirt. The man entered the room with a bemused smile on his face, watching as his nephew paced around like he was about to go on trial. You okay, kid? His uncle crossed the room to place a hand on his shoulder, and he felt a bit of his anxiety melt away. Dabi could only nod, too nervous to respond to his uncle's question. I know you're nervous, but you earned this. Everyone is going to be so proud of you, okay? Dabi once again nodded, not meeting the man's eyes. Hey, look at me. He finally locked eyes with his uncle, who was looking at him earnestly. I am so proud of you. Uncle Sho spoke so seriously, and the words filled him with the courage he needed to face everyone downstairs. Before he could stop himself, Dabi engulfed the man in a crushing hug. He was about to pull away when his uncle wrapped his arms around him, clutching him tightly. They separated after a few long moments with matching smiles on their faces, and Dabi knew it was time to tell his family that he had taken the first step to becoming a hero. The men walked downstairs together, the room falling into quiet anticipation when Dabi took his place at the front of them. Everyone was smiling up at him, and he let himself take a moment to lock eyes with each and every single one of them. Rumi, who taught him to be unapologetically himself regardless of who said otherwise. Kigo, who had dug his way into his heart and made a home there. Who always supported him unwaveringly, while encouraging him to take a break every once in a while. Uncle Mike and Uncle Sho, the men that changed his entire view of what a father could and should be. Tensei, who showed him that someone can be an outstanding hero without losing their sense of fun or adventure. Their newest additions, Nedzu, Isamu, Nemuri, and Genist, who already claimed a permanent place in their family. Tenya and Hitoshi, his little brothers in all but blood, and whose determination to be heroes motivated him every day. Izuku and Inko, his bonus brother and mother, who took him in without question when he needed it the most. He often had nightmares about who he would have become if Izuku hadn't found him that night in the store. I have some good news to share with you all, but I wanted to start off by thanking all of you. I truly could not have achieved any of this without every single one of you supporting me. Dabi began, shuffling on his feet as he reached into his pocket. He locked eyes with Uncle Sho, and the man winked at him and nodded in encouragement. Dabi took the license out of his pocket and presented it to the room, watching as realization dawned on everyone's faces. Izuku jumped up and ran towards him, tackling him into a hug. You got your hero license. The boy cried, his tight grip causing Dabi to gasp for air. Everyone else began running up to him, congratulating him and joining the hug. Zuku, you're going to choke him. Kigo pulled the greenette away, taking the boy's place by wrapping his arms around Dabi's chest. He felt his heart pounding, hoping that Kigo couldn't feel his racing pulse. "He'll be okay." I had to congratulate him. Izuku pouted, but Tenya and Hitoshi quickly distracted him by discussing what the provisional hero exam would require. "I'm so proud of you." Mike clutched him tightly, and Dabi fought the tears threatening to pour out of his eyes. "I'm glad you didn't fuck it up, emo boy." Rumi joked before patting him roughly on the back. Dabi grinned at the woman, knowing her gruff words were filled with love. He locked eyes with Inko, the woman who took him in, his mom. "My baby is a hero," she whispered, raising her hands to clasp his cheeks as she smiled up at him. Dabi could no longer fight the tears that had been building up in his eyes, and a choked sob escaped him as Inko pulled him into a hug. Their family gave the pair some space, allowing them to have a moment together as Dabi cried in the woman's arms. He thought of his other mother, his other family, and couldn't help the sadness that threatened to overtake him. He was determined, more than ever, to do everything to get the rest of his family out of his father's grasp. "Wait, what is your hero name?" Izuku questioned, his eyes shining with curiosity. Dabi laughed at his brother's excitement, pulling back from the hug to hold out his license once again. Printed in bold letters under his legal name was the name he chose for himself, the name he would use while he saved those in need. Civilian name, Dabi Midoriya. Hero name, Usher. Nakaguro. Izuku smiled as he watched his family celebrate Dabi's achievement, eating cake and milling about various rooms in the house. He was so excited for his brother and he felt like he could burst with happiness. Dabi had promised to tell him everything about the provisional licensing exam once everyone left, but Izuku already had his own theories. His brother's accomplishment only made him more determined to reach his goals to become the first quirkless hero. He wanted to be an inspiration for quirkless people and quirked people alike, proving that anyone can be a hero if they worked hard enough for it. He thought of his conversation with his uncle a few weeks ago about working on his confidence, a skill he would need if he was going to succeed. He needed to believe in himself without relying on his family and friends. His eyes began searching the room, finally landing on the exact person he needed to talk to, Aunt Nemuri. He quickly crossed the room, approaching the woman as she talked to Mike about the newest women's shelter she was opening in the city. The adults broke off the conversation as he approached, giving him their full attention. "What's up, little listener?" Mike asked with a smile. Izuku shuffled a bit, but his determination helped him overcome his anxiety. "I was actually wondering if I could talk to Auntie Nem for a minute?" The woman looked a bit surprised, but a wide smile formed on her face as she nodded. "Of course, honey. Why don't we step out on the porch for a few minutes?" The pair made their way to the backyard, taking seats on the outdoor lounge chairs scattered along the back porch. Nemuri smiled at him encouragingly, patiently waiting for Izuku to tell her what he wanted to talk about. Many people looked at his aunt and only saw the character she played, a beautiful woman who only cared about flirting to achieve her goals. As Izuku had grown to know her, he realized she was so much more than what the media portrayed her as. She was a registered counselor, using her skills to help guide the teenagers she worked with at UA. The hero also opened shelters across the city, housing kids kicked out of their homes for their quirks or identities, or giving women a safe place to live after escaping from abuse. This was only scratching the surface of the good deeds the woman in front of him was responsible for, but the media chose to only focus on shaming her for her hero persona. Izuku knew he could trust her to help him with this, and he felt himself relax as he sat back in his seat. I was hoping you could help me with my confidence a bit? Uncle Mike was talking to me about it before those villains attacked the mall a few weeks ago, and he recommended that I talk to you." Izuku adjusted himself in his seat, awaiting the woman's answer. He knew Genist, or Tsunagu, the first name the man had revealed to them tonight, would also assist him, but he preferred to go to someone he was already more familiar with. "I can definitely help with that, but I know someone else that I'd like for you to meet. Why don't you come over to my house later this week and we can have your first lesson? I'll talk to Inko about it." Izuku grinned, nodding in excitement as he imagined who his aunt would be introducing him to. All of the heroes in his family had interesting connections, ranging from civilians to other heroes. Knowing Nemuri, it wouldn't be anyone too boring. A few days later, Izuku found himself sitting on the couch while sipping a fruity non-alcoholic cocktail, sitting with his aunt in her living room. Two of her cats, Frida and O'Keefe, were snuggled against Izuku's legs for warmth. Nemuri's house was very cozy, the seats made of dark red velvet covered with fluffy pillows and blankets. Her house always smelled like a mix of spices and coffee, and Izuku always felt comfortable here. He was happy to be spending more one-on-one time with his aunt, especially now that she had agreed to help him with his self-confidence. She was sitting across from him in one of the lounge chairs, her long hair pulled up in a bun and a pair of glasses hanging low on her nose as she turned a page of her book. They were both in sweats and hoodies, staying comfortable as they waited for his aunt's guest. There was a knock on the door, and Nemuri jumped up with excitement as she strode across the room. The door opened to reveal a woman with bright green hair that immediately dove through the doorway to give his aunt a hug. "Mem!" the woman exclaimed, quickly pulling his aunt in for a quick peck on the lips. Izuku sat in stunned silence, realizing that this woman was his aunt's girlfriend. When the woman pulled away from the embrace, he finally recognized who she was, and his jaw dropped even further. Ms. Joke was his aunt's girlfriend. He stood, his body vibrating with excitement as he walked over to introduce himself to the hero. She was one of his absolute favorites. Her bright smile and lighthearted attitude always inspired him. Her fighting style was an interesting mixture of martial arts, all perfectly crafted to ensure that she could still use her quirk mid-fight. She turned to him, her smile widening even further as she opened her arms for a hug. "Is this little Izuku? I've heard so much about you, kid." Izuku stepped into the hug, already feeling comfortable around her. Nemuri was smiling at the pair, clearly pleased that they were already getting along so well. "Nice to meet you, ma'am," Izuku said, trying to be polite as they stepped out of the hug. "Oh no, I'm not that old, no need for all the formalities." Ms. Joke ruffled his hair fondly. "You can just call me Emmy, okay?" Izuku nodded, excited to refer to yet another pro by their given name. "Why don't we go sit in the living room?" Nemuri suggested, guiding her guests to sit while she grabbed them something to drink and snack on. They chatted for a bit, with Emmy asking Izuku about training and school before patiently answering all of his questions about her quirk. He enjoyed watching his aunt send loving glances towards her girlfriend as they talked. It was very clear that she was smitten. He had known that his aunt was seeing someone, but she had yet to introduce her to the family. After this, Izuku would make sure that Emmy was invited to all of their family gatherings moving forward. "So, I heard you wanted to work on your confidence?" Emmy finally asked, easing her way into what would probably become an uncomfortable conversation for the teen. It wasn't easy being vulnerable, especially with someone you just met. "Yeah, something like that." Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, unable to make eye contact with the two women as he spoke about his complicated relationship with self-worth. He explained what growing up quirkless had been like, how his closest friend became his biggest bully, the long nights wondering if he would ever reach his goals. There were days where he didn't believe he was worth the energy his mentors put into him, and he still doubted his ability to become a hero. The two women listened quietly, their eyes filled with understanding and empathy. He wasn't expecting to share so much so soon, but he trusted that they wouldn't judge him for his doubts and feelings. "Sometimes it is hard to imagine there ever being a quirkless pro-hero," he said, his head hanging as he stared at his feet. "No one thought I could be a hero with a quirk like mine, but look at me now." Emmy replied, and Izuku's head shot up. He had seen comments on messenger boards saying people with quirks like Ms. Jokes shouldn't be heroes, but he had never thought about the real-life harassment the woman probably faced on a daily basis. "No one believed in me either, not even my own family." Nemuri frowned into her cup of tea, and in that moment Izuku wished he could find his aunt's family to give them a piece of his mind. He must have been scowling as both women began to chuckle. "It's okay, Zuku, I have a new family now." She ruffled his hair and smiled warmly, and he felt his anger dissipate a bit. It's sadly a reality for a lot of people with unheroic quirks, especially for women. Emmy shrugged casually, but it just made Izuku angrier at society. These two women were some of the best heroes in the country, and the fact that people doubted them infuriated him. "The key to building confidence is resilience," Emmy began, and Izuku paid close attention as she spoke. You have to learn to let things roll off your back, whether it's a hate comment or someone doubting your abilities. Confidence has to come from within, and will teach you the lessons I wish I knew as a kid. Emi let Izuku take in her words, and he wondered if he would eventually be able to ignore his classmates' taunts. Alright, I am willing to learn. He was willing to do whatever it took to be the best hero he could be, and this was just one step of many. They sat for another 2 hours, and Emi taught him how she separated her hero persona from her civilian identity. It helped her disconnect from any negativity that came her way, whether from the media or trolls on the internet. Nemuri talked to him about how her hero persona made her feel empowered, and that Izuku should create an identity that makes him feel invincible. She told him the importance of being yourself unapologetically, as well as the difficulties that came with it. They had agreed to meet once a week on Sundays, and their lessons would range from conversations to going out in public to practice the skills they went over. He felt re-energized, ready to face the world and prove anyone who ever doubted him wrong. Izuku left his Aunt Nemuri's house, giving his aunt some alone time with her girlfriend. He couldn't wait to introduce Emi to everyone else, especially Hitoshi. The woman would have great advice for his friend's voice-activated quirk, and could potentially give him some new methods for getting a verbal response. He and Hitoshi had planned to hang out after he was done at Nemuri's, so he made his way to the Yamada Izawa household. Both of his uncles had worked with Ms. Joke in the past, and he wondered if they knew about her relationship with Nemuri. He had promised his aunt that he wouldn't divulge that aspect of their relationship until she had a chance to tell everyone at dinner this weekend. He used his spare tea to enter the house, smiling when a few cats began circling around his legs. A fluffy gray cat was staring up at him, her wide eyes boring into Izuku's soul. "Trash can, I promise I didn't mean to play with other kitties today. You're still my best girl." Izuku tried to placate the feline that had grown an attachment to him ever since she was found in a garbage can by Shota a few years ago. The cat simply huffed, her tail swaying as she continued to stare him down. He carefully approached her, petting her ears and head before slowly moving to pick her up. She melted into his chest and nuzzled her head into him as he rubbed her back and cooed at her. It seemed that all was forgiven, and he would need to remember to bring a change of clothes whenever he came from his aunt's. "Who is the best kitty?" He smiled at the cat as she licked his chin with her sandpaper tongue. "Sometimes I think she likes you more than me." Shota stepped out of the kitchen with a cup of coffee in his hands, wearing a fuzzy sweatshirt and his favorite bright pink sweatpants. "You did name her after a garbage can, hun?" Zashi followed him into the room, wrapping an arm around the black-haired man's shoulders as he pouted a bit. "I want her to remember where she came from." Shota huffed, sitting down on the couch as Mike called upstairs to let Hitoshi know that Izuku was there. "How did your lesson with Nem go, kiddo?" Mike took a seat next to his husband, and most of the cats made their way to their dad's laps and sides. Izuku took a seat in one of the lounge chairs with Trash Can still nuzzled closely into his chest. It was a lot of fun. Ms. Joke actually came over to help as well. Izuku watched as both of his uncles raised their eyebrows, and their expressions told him that they had suspicions about the relationship between Nemuri and Emi. "Did she now?" Mike asked, his tone conspiratorial as he glanced over to his husband. "I am not sure what she could possibly offer." Shota grunted, but the small grin on his face was proof that he wasn't being serious. "Emi is really nice, Uncle Sho. I was actually thinking about learning some stealth moves from her." Izuku giggled at his uncle's offended expression, while Mike chuckled at his nephew's mischievousness. "You wouldn't. That woman wouldn't know what stealth was if it hit her in the face." Shota crossed his arms and pouted, a gesture that looked ridiculous coming from the gruff man. "Dad, are you messing with Zuku again?" Hitoshi jumped over the back of the lounge chair, squishing Izuku into one of the arms as he made himself comfortable. "Why would I ever mess with my nephew? What type of uncle do you think I am?" Shota smirked into his coffee, clearly enjoying teasing Hitoshi and Izuku. "Alright, Sho. Enough terrorizing the kids, why don't you go grab our guest something to drink?" Mike pushed his husband up from the couch, the black-haired man grumbling but still completing the blonde's request. As soon as he left the room, Izuku asked a question that had been on his mind since he first entered the house. "Does Uncle Sho really hate Emi?" Izuku's hands wrung together, He didn't want two of his mentors disliking each other. He already had to deal with the strange relationship between Genist and Mic. Mic's eyes softened at Izuku's concern, but shook his head at the question. Not at all. They have some sort of sibling dynamic going on. Although Shota tries to act like she annoys him, he'd take down anyone who tried to mess with her. Izuku immediately relaxed, happy to know there wouldn't be any drama when Emi came around for dinner. Shota returned after a few minutes with glasses of juice for the kids, and the adults left Hitoshi and Izuku to hang out on their own. Do you want to play video games, or do you want to go out and do something? Hitoshi asked as they finished their drinks. Izuku thought it over for a moment before deciding. Let's go out. The weather is really nice today. The boys let Shota and Mic know where they were going and walked to the nearest ice cream store. Izuku got chili mango, a longtime favorite of his after he grew to love spicy food due to his ex-childhood best friend. Hitoshi settled on mint chocolate chip, and the boys decided to walk around as they finished their treats. Their conversation shifted to their training as they walked, since they shared similar training plans. Neither of them had a physical quirk, so they had to train their bodies to peak condition. I need to work on my upper body strength more, seeing how ripped Rumi is has been motivating me recently. Hitoshi mentioned before continuing to eat his cone. The purple-haired boy was tall with lean muscles, just like both of his fathers. If you want to go into underground heroics, you should probably focus on bulking up in a way that won't affect your ability to move quickly. Bulky muscles would slow you down when hopping between buildings or trying to apprehend a villain at night. Izuku had pages upon pages of notes on underground heroes, especially Eraserhead. None of the underground heroes in their city were bulky, due to the requirements of the field. Hitoshi had a contemplative look on his face, passively eating his ice cream as he thought it over. That's a good point, thanks Izuku. The boys continued walking, not really following any specific path as they ate and discussed different heroes that inspired them. They had strayed a little farther than anticipated, but something caught Izuku's attention. Takoba Beach was right in front of them, sprawling piles of trash blocking their view of the ocean and causing a distinct smell to waft through the air with the sea breeze. Izuku watched as a bird picked through the trash in search of food, and an idea popped in his mind. Toshi, you're still going to try to build your upper body strength, right? Izuku continued staring at the trash in front of them, eyeing the countless appliances and other large objects scattering the landscape. Yeah. Hitoshi gave him a puzzled look, confused by the sudden topic change. I think I know something we can do to help with that. Nakaguro. I am never listening to one of your ideas again. Hitoshi groaned as he lugged a microwave on one of his shoulders. He was covered in sweat, and Izuku and Tenya weren't faring any better. That's a lie and you know it. Izuku huffed as he threw the large piece of metal he had been carrying into the dumpster near the boardwalk. Tenya was filling bags with smaller pieces of trash further down the beach, taking a break from heavy lifting for the day. When Izuku had mentioned the beach cleanup project to his family, Genist had immediately hired a waste management company to provide them with dumpsters and other necessary materials. Shota and Inko helped them get permission and permits for everything, while Mic tried to convince them to wear matching shirts throughout the project. The man had insisted that it would be an adorable way to promote their good deed, but all three boys had declined. All of the adults helped them out when they could, but the three boys had taken on the brunt of the work. How are you boys holding up? Do you need to take a break or drink some water? Isamu asked as he finished throwing a mini fridge into the dumpster. Izuku had always known pro heroes were exceptionally strong, but the days where the pros in his life joined them at the beach solidified that fact in his mind. Watching Rumi deadlift a full-sized refrigerator was both motivating and terrifying, but it helped him set new goals for strength training. Izuku's muscles were sore after hours of cleaning up the coastline, and he wasn't sure if he could go on any further today. One look at Hitoshi was enough for him to know the other boy was thinking the exact same thing. I think we should call it a day, Isamu. Izuku responded, turning to call out for Tenya to rejoin them. A loud crash suddenly rang through the air, and the trio watched as a tall pile of trash collapsed 20 feet away from them. They were about to write it off as a random incident, but a cry of pain immediately sent them all into rescue mode. Isamu ran ahead of them, while Izuku took out his cell phone in case someone needed medical attention. Hitoshi followed close behind, and Izuku could hear Tenya's engines getting closer and closer by the second. His two friends weren't technically supposed to use their quirks like this, but the adults tended to look the other way during an emergency. As they approached the collapsed pile, a pink blur suddenly shot out, almost tackling Izuku before he moved out of the way. He immediately fell into a fighting stance, unsure of what exactly they were facing. A pink-haired girl around his age stood up from a few feet away, brushing herself off before glaring at Izuku. "Are you the ones who have been taking away all of the baby-making materials?" She crossed her arms, deepening her scowl as she awaited a response. Isamu and the three boys stared at her in shock, all frozen in place as they tried to process what she was saying. Tenya seemed to break out of the daze first, giving her a disapproving look before responding. "I beg your pardon?" he exclaimed incredulously, and Izuku wouldn't be surprised if he gave her a lecture on manners and appropriate speech if they let him continue. The girl seemed unperturbed by the disapproving stares the blue-haired boy was sending her way, as she simply sighed and rolled her eyes in annoyance. She was acting like she hadn't said something absolutely ridiculous just a moment ago. "I call my inventions babies, princess." Tenya scoffed at the nickname, but the girl ignored him before gesturing towards the piles of trash and continuing her explanation. "I use spare parts one find here to work on my babies, but the good stuff has been disappearing lately. It's your fault, isn't it?" She no longer seemed murderous, but she still looked annoyed at the idea of their cleanup project. Izuku was unsure of what to say in response to her accusation. He didn't realize anyone was using the beach in such a way. An idea came to his mind, and he hoped it would help alleviate some of the tension in the air. "Why don't we just partner up?" he offered, ignoring the wide-eyed glance Hitoshi sent his way. This girl had tried to tackle him a few moments ago, but he would also be angry if he was in her shoes. She eyed him suspiciously, clearly trying to figure out the true intentions behind the offer. Finally, she uncrossed her arms and walked a bit closer towards the group. "What would be the terms of the partnership?" she asked, her eyes still filled with distrust. Izuku thought for a moment, thinking over which options would work best for everyone involved. "Why don't you join us on the days we are cleaning, and if you see anything you want we can put it aside for you." She contemplated his offer before nodding and stretching her hand out for a shake. "Sounds like a plan, Greenie. I'm May, future CEO of Hatsum Industries and the best inverter you'll ever meet." Izuku took her hand, surprised by the confidence behind her statement. "I'm Midoriya Izuku." They shook hands before the rest of the group introduced themselves. May was surprised to see the pro-hero Snipe outside of his mask, but she didn't pester the hero with too many questions. "So, are you trying to be heroes?" she asked after they explained they were using the beach cleanup as a way to give back to their community while also building upper body strength. "You bet they are. These kids are some of the most dedicated students I've ever seen." Isamu piped in, making all three boys blush in embarrassment at the praise. May's eyes sparkled with interest, and she asked the one question Izuku had been dreading since she had agreed to partner up with them. "What are your quirks?" Hitoshi and Izuku shifted on their feet anxiously, but they were saved when Tenya stepped up to answer her question first. As he explained his quirk to the inventor, the girl's eyes shined with intelligence and fascination. It was clear that she was already planning things to create to aid Tenya in his career as a hero. When he was finished, Hitoshi stepped up next. "My quirk is brainwashing." His tone was challenging, as though he was daring her to have an issue with his power. There was a slight pause before May began jumping up and down with excitement. "You have so much baby-making potential." Isamu and the boys cringed a bit at her wording, but they were more relieved that she hadn't had a problem with the purple-haired boy's quirk. "Thanks. I guess." Hitoshi's cheeks were bright red, but Izuku could tell he was thankful for the acceptance. "What about you, Greenie? Do you have some type of analysis quirk? I saw the way you were thinking over our partnership earlier." Izuku tried to ignore the churning in his stomach, remembering the sessions he had spent with Emi and Namuri to boost his confidence. He didn't need validation from others. He knew he could reach his goals if he continued working towards them. "I'm actually quirkless," he says firmly, standing tall as he awaited her reaction. Isamu, Tenya, and Hitoshi were tense as they glanced between May and Izuku. Mei seemed frozen in place, her jaw hanging low as she stared at Izuku for a long moment. She seemed to finally reboot herself before flinging her body at Izuku. He was so shocked that he barely had time to catch her, and he felt her practically vibrating with excitement as he placed her back on the ground. "You're perfect," she exclaimed, before diving into a muttering storm that reminded Izuku so much of his younger self. The only words he caught were blank canvas and so many possibilities, and a warm feeling bloomed at his chest when he realized Mei had accepted his lack of a quirk without question. Izuku felt like he could cry, but he saved the tears as he continued to listen to the girl's muttered thoughts. His friends and mentors seemed to relax after she began muttering, and now they were simply enjoying Mei's intelligent muttering. After a few moments, Isamu broke her out of the spell to invite her to their next destination. "We were just about to go to a nearby cafe, would you like to join us?" the man asked, and Izuku was once again grateful for his kindness. Isamu wasn't an uncle to him, like Shota or Mike, but he wasn't a brother-like figure either. Izuku was still figuring out their relationship, but he was so grateful the man had made his way into their lives. Mei glanced nervously between Isamu and Izuku, and the boys were completely taken aback by the change of demeanor. The confidence from minutes ago was gone, replaced by uncertainty and nervousness. Izuku didn't know what had caused the sudden change until Mei finally spoke. "Are you sure you want to hang out with me?" She seemed to be eyeing Hitoshi and Tenya specifically, but her gaze fell on Izuku as well. Izuku immediately glanced at Hitoshi, and an understanding passed between them. They recognized the look she was giving them, as well as the hesitancy in her voice. Before either boy could speak up to reassure her, Tenya stepped in. "Absolutely. We are always looking for new friends." Mei relaxed a bit, smiling at the three boys before nodding. Izuku looked at Tenya, once again reminded of how much he had grown from the boy he had met years ago. "Just make sure to let your guardians know where you're going. I can give you a ride home after we finish up at the cafe," Isamu assured, but Mei simply shrugged. "My folks are out of town." She wasn't making eye contact with the man, choosing to focus on her fingernails instead. Snipe immediately paused, staring intently at the child in front of him as she avoided his concerned gaze. "Is there anyone at home to keep an eye on you?" Isamu asked, and his tone told Izuku that he was in hero mode now. Mei puffed out her chest, straightening up and staring the man directly in the eyes. "I can take care of myself," she insisted, her tone defiant. The three boys locked eyes, concern written over their features as they waited for their mentor's response. Isamu had a serious expression on his face, and he seemed to be choosing his next words carefully. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally spoke again. "Sure you can, sharpshooter. Why don't we get you kiddos some treats to reward you for the hard work you did today?" Izuku was surprised by the man's choice to not push the issue, but clearly realized he was trying not to scare the girl away. On the walk to the cafe, Isamu was continuously checking his phone, texting back and forth with someone the entire time. Izuku was sure that he was texting his mom and the other adults in their family about the concerning statements Mei had made. When they entered the cafe, Mr. Kobayashi greeted them warmly, ushering them to a table before introducing himself to Mei. "Hello, are you a new friend of the boys? My name is Mr. Kobayashi, I am the owner of the shop." Mei seemed a bit shy, but she greeted the man and introduced herself. "My name is Mei, I just met them today but I'd like to think we're friends." She looked at the three boys as though she were looking for confirmation. "We are definitely friends," Izuku responded, a bright smile on his face at the idea of another friend. He noticed that Isamu was staring at the cafe owner intently, like he was trying to solve some sort of puzzle. "I'm sorry, but do I know you from somewhere? You look awfully familiar," Isamu finally asked, still staring at Mr. Kobayashi. The cafe owner paused for a moment, but he quickly recovered as a wide smile filled his face. "I don't think so. I just have one of those faces, I suppose." The man shrugged before walking off, and Isamu kept his eyes on his back until he entered the kitchen. "I swear I know him from somewhere," the hero muttered to himself, but he turned to the kids after a moment. "Let's get you guys those treats." Mr. Kobayashi knew the boys' regular orders, and he promised to remember Mei and Isamu's orders for their next visit. It was strange to think that out of his family only his mother, Dabi, Kigo, and Rumi had been to the cafe with them. It had become such a staple in Izuku's life, with Mr. Kobayashi being a constant calming presence for him. They ate their sweets happily, finally relaxing after a long day of physical labor. Mei had tried to offer Snipe money, but the man absolutely refused. Izuku couldn't help but wonder how the hero was going to handle her home situation. Hitoshi and Mei were discussing a voice modifier, and Izuku's ears immediately perked up. He had thought about creating a similar device before, but Mei's ideas were truly groundbreaking. She wasn't lying when she said she was an excellent inventor, and he quickly got sucked into the conversation. Tenya and Isamu joined as well, clearly fascinated by the way the girl's mind worked. Izuku couldn't help but think that Nezu would absolutely adore her, and he knew he would need to introduce the two soon. She would fit in perfectly in Yue's support department, although she might cause Power Loader to have a few heart attacks if her casual mention of exploding inventions was anything to go by. They had just finished eating when Uncle Shota walked in casually, like he hadn't showed up unexpectedly. Izuku knew that he was probably here to figure out what was going on with Mei's parents, so he decided to play it off. "Hey, Uncle Sho," he greeted as the man approached their table. "Hey Dad, I didn't know you were coming by." Izuku could tell Hitoshi was confused as well, but he played it cool. "I wanted a cup of coffee and I thought I should check out the cafe you boys have been telling me about." Before anyone could respond, Mr. Kobayashi was handing Shota a steaming hot mug of coffee. The hero cautiously took it, staring at the cafe owner suspiciously as he took a sip. "How did you know my order?" his uncle asked, his eyes narrowed as he stared the other man down. "Lucky guess, I suppose." Mr. Kobayashi gave the hero a small smile before returning to the back of the shop. Shota sat down, but he looked like he was still thinking about the interaction with the cafe owner as he sipped his drink. "You're Eraserhead, right?" Mei's eyes were wide with wonder, and Izuku's uncle looked surprised for a moment before nodding. Not many people recognized him as an underground hero, and it always astonished him when someone did. Mei began asking the man questions about his support items, especially his capture scarf. Shota answered her questions as much as he could, keeping certain classified facts to himself. Izuku wondered when the elephant in the room would be addressed, but he was happy that his uncle was at least trying to build a bit of trust with the girl before asking about her home life. After about 20 minutes, Shota finally asked if he could speak to the girl on the other side of the cafe, away from any patrons. Mei nodded nervously, and it was clear she already knew what the conversation would entail. Tenya tried to make conversation while their uncle spoke to their new friend, but they were all tense as they waited for her to return to the table. Izuku hoped her situation was not as bad as it seemed, but based on his uncle's expression it may be worse than they thought. The pair finally made their way back to the table, and Izuku saw the burning rage behind his uncle's eyes. Mei looked relieved, but also emotionally exhausted. "Is it okay if I tell them too? I want them to know," she asked, gesturing towards the three boys. Shota hesitated for a moment before nodding. "It's your story to tell, kid." Izuku felt his blood boil as his friend explained that her parents moved to America around a year ago, refusing to take her with them in case she distracted them from their work. They sent her just enough money to survive every 2 or so weeks, but she hadn't received a call or text since they left. She didn't have any other family members, so she had been alone the entire time. Tenya was glaring at the table, and Hitoshi was clenching his fists tight enough to make his knuckles turn white. Isamu was squeezing the edges of the table, and Izuku could tell the man was desperately trying to control his temper. "Luckily, I know someone who would love to take Mei in. She's coming home with us until then though," Shota explained, and Izuku was glad his friend would have a loving home to go to after this. He wondered who exactly she would be staying with, but he wouldn't be surprised if it was a hero. His uncle explained that he would try to get the government to extradite Mei's parents back to Japan for punishment, but he wasn't confident that it would work. Nezu had already filed for their custody to be removed, which was the most important thing they could do for the girl. "I'm sorry I am causing so much trouble for you all," Mei said quietly, her head hanging low as she fidgeted with her hands. Izuku's heart broke for his friend, knowing that she was made to feel like a burden simply for existing. "Look at me, kid." Shota spoke softly, a tone he only reserved for delicate situations like this. Her eyes hesitantly met his, and he placed a hand on her shoulder to keep her focus on him. "You are not a burden, do you understand me?" Izuku could tell the man was angry. He loved children and hated when they were mistreated. Tears began pouring down Mei's face, and Izuku wondered if that was the first time she had ever been reassured. She launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around the gruff underground hero. The man froze for a moment, but his arms quickly wrapped around the girl's shoulders to hug her back. They all sat quietly, letting Mei calm down a bit before they left. Mr. Kobayashi emerged from the kitchen with a to-go container filled with treats, insisting that they take them home to share. The man always seemed to anticipate their needs like this, and Izuku was grateful as he watched Mei happily bite into a pastry as they left the shop. Isamu grabbed his truck from a few blocks away and drove them to the Midoriya household, where Mike and Inko were waiting for them. Shota explained that they kept the welcome party small so that Mei wouldn't get overwhelmed. "Hello, sweetie. My name is Inko. I am Dabi and Izuku's mother." Inko pulled the girl into a hug, squeezing her tightly before letting her go. Izuku knew his mother's hugs were magical, and he was happy his new friend got to experience them now. Mike introduced himself, and the group made their way to the living room to sit and talk about their next steps. "Now, before we get started, I wanted to see if you'd like for the boys to go upstairs? I know talking about these sorts of things can be difficult." Inko offered as she passed Mei a cup of steaming hot tea. Mei looked towards Izuku, Hitoshi, and Tenya before turning back to the adults. "They can stay, they're my friends now." Izuku smiled, happy that she already considered them good friends. "All right, but just let us know if that decision changes at any point." Inko spoke, sitting back in her seat next to Isamu. "Mei, there is someone here who would love to take you in. He's in the other room at the moment because we didn't want to overwhelm you as soon as you walked in the door, but would you like to meet him?" Shota spoke, eyeing the girl for any signs of distress. "Yes, I'd like to meet him." Mei seemed unsure, but Izuku reached out to squeeze her hand, hoping she would find comfort in his presence. Shota stood, walking towards Inko's office and popping his head in the door. "She's ready to meet you," Izuku heard his uncle say, and then a shorter man followed him out into the living room. It took a moment for him to recognize the man, and his eyes widened in excitement when he realized which hero was in his home. "Power Loader?" Mei exclaimed, jumping up and running towards the man. Izuku could understand her excitement. He had only met the man a few times at UA, but he was always kind and exceptionally intelligent. Having a support hero as her new mentor seemed like the perfect option for the girl. "You can call me Higuri, kid. Especially since you're going to be staying with me if you'd like." Power Loader, or Higuri, graciously accepted the hug Mei was giving him. He chuckled at her excitement, but Izuku could tell he was happy that she was having a positive reaction to all of this. The pink-haired girl pulled away a bit, staring up at the man with sparkling eyes. "You want to be my dad?" The room got quiet, waiting for the hero to respond to Mei's question. The man's eyes softened, and he scratched the back of his neck shyly before responding. "I've been wanting a family for a while, and Isamu told me so many great things about you. I wouldn't force you to call me dad or anything, I can just provide you with a safe and supportive place to stay." The man seemed nervous, and Izuku's respect for him grew even further. "I'd love to stay with you. Do you have tools in your house? What types of workstations do you have?" Unsurprisingly, the girl and the hero dived right into talking about their shared passion for inventing while the rest of the group watched with smiles on their faces. Izuku turned to his mom, but paused when he saw a certain look in her eyes that he recognized well. It was the look she got in her eyes when she was ready to go into battle for a client, and it always ended with Inko winning. He wouldn't be surprised if she somehow had Mei's parents charged and jailed by the end of the week. After all of the fine details had been sorted out, everyone began heading back home for the night. Tensei came to pick Tenya up, joking about Izuku's growing collection of people. "Pretty soon this family is going to include everyone in this city." The man joked, ruffling Izuku's hair. "It's not like I do it on purpose," Izuku argued, pouting as he crossed his arms in front of him. "Zuku, you basically forced me to come home with you." Dabi appeared behind him, cackling when his brother sent a fierce glare his way. I don't hear you complaining when mom makes the super spicy ramen that you love so much. Izuku shoved his brother before heading back into the living room. Mei left with Higuri, Shota, Mike, and Hitoshi to get her things from her old house before heading to her new home. Higuri had cleared 2 rooms out for the girl, one for her own personal workshop and one for her bedroom. Izuku was excited for his friend, and couldn't wait to introduce her to Nezu as soon as he could. It was finally time for bed, and he stretched his arms over his head as a yawn ripped through his body. You boys get ready for bed, I have a few calls to make in the office. Just let me know if you need anything, okay? Inko kissed their heads before walking towards her office. Mom is terrifying when she gets like this. Dabi shuddered, watching as the woman shut the door behind her. She really is. Izuku agreed, happy that his friend would be getting the justice she deserved. Izuku's adopted heroes. Mirko, why has it taken so long for me to get added to this chat? Sad face. Ronald McDonald, at least you weren't named after a clown. Mirko, but you're a very cute clown, winky face. Uncle Sleepy, no flirting in the chat. Uncle Loud, show, you sent a picture of me cuddling with the cats and said, 2 of my favorite things, yesterday. You can't tell Nem and Emmy not to flirt in the chat. Mini Sleepy, how about we don't let anyone flirt in the chat? Pink Gremlin, can I make an electrified whip for Aunt Nemuri? Smiley face. New York Quill, electric whip? Tell me more. Angry Rabbit, can I get one too? Chicken Nugget, a whip doesn't even work with your fighting style? Angry Rabbit, I'll make it work. Mini Sleepy, I want one too. Uncle Sleepy, Hitoshi, no. Mini Sleepy, Hitoshi, yes, smiley face. Green Gremlin, May, when you come to meet Nezu we can talk about making the whips. Laughing face. Mama Midoriya, make sure an adult is supervising you at all times, kids. Bro. Letting him make electrified whips? Mama Midoriya, I think it will be a great way for them to use their creativity. Smiley face. Denim Man, I open my messages to a discussion on electric whips? Green Gremlin, do you want one? I think we could make it out of fabric so you could control it. Laughing face. Denim Man. Rat God, I look forward to our next meeting, children. Smiley face. Dig Dug, I insist on supervising. Pink Gremlin, why? Yeehaw, I have a feeling the UA's support department is going to be experiencing a lot more explosions now. Zoom Zoom, can I test the electric whips? Zoom Zoom Jr., really, Tensei?